Good evening. This is the January 18, 2018 meeting of the Monroe Planning and Zoning Commission. We're in Town Council Chambers. It's now 7:02 p.m. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the commission members please introduce yourself, starting on my right?
Ryan Condon, alternate.
Jonathan Formicella, alternate. Bruno Maini, commissioner.
Leanne Ambrosi, Commissioner.
William Porter, Chairman.
Michael Riley, vice chairman.
Will Augusta Planner.
Scott Schatz, I am Land Use Scoop Director and Town Engineer.
Rebecca Wood, recording secretary.
And I'd like to welcome Bruno. He's been elevated from a alternate to a full seat. And our new member, Ryan, welcome.
Thank you.
Item number 3, organizational items. Town Council 824 municipal referral regarding the extension of public sidewalks. Who's taking that?
Do you want to, in the agenda, I had it marked to go along, do it at the same time as the public hearing.
All right, so we're going to put that off until item number 7. Item number 4, general public participation. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on any issue not related to a public hearing? Nothing? Okay. Move on. Item number 5, general appointments. First up, David Bjorklund, P.E., 1585 Monroe Turnpike. Discuss development of the property. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Thank you, members of the commission. My name is Dave Bjorklund. I'm with Spat Bjorklund Associates. We have offices here in Monroe. What I'd like to discuss this evening is 1585 Monroe Turnpike, which is, I'm sure everybody's familiar with it on the commission. It's the former Stevenson Lumber, which was closed some years ago. The parcel's designated B2. I think it's the largest B2 zone parcel in the town of Monroe. The parcel size is 42 acres, contains 8 buildings and sheds. Most of those are in poor condition because when you just leave something idle for a long time, the roofs are leaking. There have been some vandals that have been on the property, and they're just in very poor condition for the most part. The current owner of the property and my client is Investa Services of Atlanta, Georgia. And what I'd like to discuss this evening is what has happened with the property prior to Investa taking possession of the property and what's happened in the meantime. Prior to Investa taking control of the property, when Ken Myron still had it, it had been marketed by OR&L, and some of the commission members may remember that for a very short period of time, CL&P was using the lumberyard as a staging area. That was supposed to be a long-term relationship, but that CL&P pulled out and went to other places. Other brokers who listed it were Colliers International, and right now it is listed by the Hartford office of CBRE. CBRE is a well-known commercial realty market, and they have connections worldwide. CBRE, when they got the listing in January of 2016, they did a comprehensive mail. They listed it on the state of Connecticut EDC, and really reached out to any commercial developers in the area and or just commercial users who might look for the expansion and to be in this area. The following people have looked at the property. I already mentioned CL&P was used for firewood processing for a while. That was not in conformance with zoning. That operation has ceased. People looked at it for ethanol production because of the rail siding. The railway is now closed and has been closed for a number of years. People looked at the site for indoor-outdoor recreation, a lumberyard, warehousing, recycling and sorting facility, retail, solar farms, and educational institutions. All of these people looked at the property and they walked away for one reason or another. For the most part, people see the property as this is the lower portion that is down on Route 111. People who look at that portion of the property, it makes sense. It's a good location for retail. It's not going to be a difficult site to develop. And a lot of people said, well, I could do something here. But then everybody started to look at what I refer to as the upper 25 acres, which does have access out to Old Sore Road. And it also, there is a road, there are two roads that connect the lower property to the upper property. Most people who looked at the property couldn't, when they looked at this upper portion, they couldn't come to any conclusion as to how they could use it for business purposes. It's disconnected topographically by quite a change in grade from this point here up to this point here. And as I said, you know, an intensive marketing program was undertaken, and just everybody who looked at it, they couldn't quite figure out what to do with it. Part of it has to do with that it's remote. This is not lower Route 111. This is not the most populated part of town. And like I said, my client has become frustrated with marketing the piece of property. About a year ago, a developer who is familiar with the town of Monroe, Jim Pendry, came forward, and Jim has worked with our office quite a bit, and we came to the conclusion that what could work on the property would be to develop the Route 111 portion of the property as retail, and then the upper portion of the property, if it could be developed as a higher density housing development, it would be a good transition zone. Whispering Pine is a 2-acre residential subdivision. To the north, we have the railroad track and then some open space in the Boys Halfway River, so there wouldn't be any impact in that direction. But looking at the utilization of the property, the old Trust Tech location is right here. And as we thought about it, we said this really wouldn't be, that people who live here really wouldn't want to see an intensive commercial use reopen in this area, and that they probably to incorporate housing into this area would be a better transition. In order to do this, we'd have to do a text amendment to the multifamily regulation. The multifamily regulation right now, the minimum lot size is 70 acres, and we would have to drop it to 25 acres. There are approximately 25 pieces in town that are currently zoned residential that have 25 or more acres. So this could, if this text amendment were implemented, this could affect other properties. And the reason why we're here this evening is that we wanted to have a discussion with the commission about the feasibility of implementing this. Just so that you know who Jim Pendry is. Jim Pendry is Summit Residential, and Jim was the developer who developed Great Oak Farm on Cutler's Farm Road. And what we have here is we have a little presentation of some of the other projects that he has pursued since 1994 around the area. To Monroe, I think everybody in Monroe thinks that Great Oak is a development that has turned out to be quite nice. And so what the Investa has gone to contract with Jim in order to implement the development of the property. So that's our presentation in a nutshell. That's what we wanted to have a discussion with the commission on, was in essence taking the upper 25 acres or 30 acres of this 42-acre piece of property and working with the commission to change it to a residential zone.
Which residential zone?
Be the MFR, the multifamily regulation, which Minimum lot size currently is 70 acres. You're permitted to have 2.5 attached units to the acre. The proposal here would be to have detached units, single family, similar to Great Oak, and we'd be proposing to have probably somewhere between 25 and 30 units. That's all that the piece would support. We have done septic testing on the piece, and we are limited by the septic capacity that's available.
But if it were an MFR, there would be nothing preventing you from going with multi-family units, correct?
No, it wouldn't work on this piece, just because of septic capacity. But no, the regulation allows multifamily, I believe 6 units to a building. And, you know, we'd be willing to work with the commission to come up with other text amendments to MFR to have this only work as with detached dwellings.
Well, a couple other things that I just want to throw out there. You know, our ARR zone only requires a minimum of 10 acres, so that would work.
Right.
But you know the limitations to that. But we also have the housing opportunity zone that is no less than 20, but no more than 25 acres. Have you looked into the suitability of that?
Didn't really want to pursue that type of housing, as far as that goes, and we just don't think this is a great spot for the adult housing type of housing. I'm obviously very aware of both of those regulations. What we'd like to do is do something more like Great Oak, which was very successful, and we think that type of housing, if priced properly.
How many acres was Great Oak Farm?
Oh, I think it was 100, and yeah, it was.
We gave 40 acres to the park, so I think it started out as 150, we ended up at 102.
Considerably larger than this, though.
Yes.
Well, and much higher density, over 150 homes. So, you know, we're looking to do 25 to 30, so it's still, 1 to the acre kind of density, which Great Oak was higher than that.
I want to, since we have some new members on the commission, I want to point out, this is a general appointment. This is an informal, non-binding conversation between the applicant and the commission. So we can throw out ideas, ask questions, get answers, but none of this is binding. They're just looking for the feedback from the commission about how we feel about this before they proceed with a formal application. So, that being said, what do people think?
How are you going to separate the two properties?
What's the plan? Really, they're separated topographically. I've got a topo map.
So you're saying there's no way you could get from one property to the other?
Well, there currently is a very steep road that connects the two pieces of property. When Trust Tech was in operation, it really operated independently. It used this access drive that came out here to the end of Old Zor, and then they quickly were on Route 111. This road would be closed off, and as you can see here, we've got a band of some very tough topo.
Closed off meaning?
It would be permanently closed. There would be no connection. Assuming phase 2 would be to develop this as a retail center, there would be no connection between the two developments.
Why do you ask that question?
Just curious. Because if you have a retail center, I don't know, I mean, just traffic-wise and stuff like that.
Well, I don't think,
Separate entities, for sure.
yeah, I don't think the
Separate
retail
entities,
center
but
would
if you
feel,
have-
they
if you
wouldn't
have
want
a-
to have
if you have a road-
access, especially
if
to
you
the
have an
rear.
access road between the two. I know, but
So you're not interested in combining them? We had an applicant here last year who was, this is new idea of building residential and having retail nearby so that the people living there can walk to the grocery store and walk to get their haircut and that type of thing. There's a new idea out there. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, a mixed-use
Mixed
development.
use.
A lot of Trumbull has just approved a zone where you can have apartments above retail. Matter of fact, Long Hill Green, that's how that's been developed. There's 18 apartments above that
So
retail.
you're not talking about anything like that? This is gonna be
This would be a
separate-
separate standalone,
standalone items?
yes.
Any
And
idea
it would-
what's gonna go into the commercial half?
No, as I said, some of the people who looked at the piece said, you know, if it were separated, that, you know, a retail operation right down where the old lumber yard
Easier to sell.
would make sense. And that there's room there for an awful lot of retail space. We had also, with Jim Pendery, explored modifying the B2 regulation and maybe doing some kind of indoor-outdoor sports facility. There's plenty of room to do it. We could have retail and parking in the front here, and then out back here, there's enough room to do outdoor and indoor sports facilities. There's a lot of opportunities on the lower. What we're wrestling with, and when Jim came to investor with this idea, we said we think that this is worth pursuing. This could lead to a reasonable development of the property.
These are all single-family homes?
Yes, they'd be detached, single family.
So you plan on doing it in phases?
The housing would be the first phase, yes.
So you
We're,
wouldn't wanna- you
the
wouldn't
marketing
wanna-
goes on. If somebody came and, wanted to do the retail, but right now when people look at the entire piece, they go, I can't, if I want to do retail, I have no need for this rear 25 acres.
Yeah, because I'd like to see the property developed. But, I mean, I don't want to see the retail part just sitting there for a long time.
Well,
I'd love if you came in a plan to do retail and the housing at the same time. It would be,
well, I don't think we have any coming forward with a plan that would show both. We're waiting for the right retail user to come along, and, quite possibly, what happens is if you do have an approval and it's in hand, it's a lot easier to attract somebody.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody? If you recall, when we did the last ARR application, which you handled for the applicant, there were some concerns over single-family homes versus multi-family units. And at that time, we said, gee, when we were creating the ARR, maybe we should have created a 1 and a 2. If we lower the threshold for the MFR zone, that applies in other locations, other parcels around town that could then take advantage of that zone change. And they might be sites that would handle multifamily. And I think there's a big difference between a multifamily complex and a single family, depending on the surrounding neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe we should look at, if we are going to consider reducing the total acreage required, instead of just going with an MFR, maybe we should look at like an MFR, different category.
Just as we had discussed with the
And,
ARR.
and say, any parcels under X number of acres are limited to single-family dwelling.
We'd be glad to.
Because in this area, you're abutting RF2 and RF3 zones, and I don't think multifamily structures in that neighborhood would really be appropriate. But if the zone change went in, there would be nothing
There'd be nothing
preventing
to stop.
anyone from putting multifamily dwellings in.
Right.
So I would want to see some protection, if we were to proceed, some protection to limit that to single-family dwellings.
Okay, like I said, I think that's Multifamily isn't our intent, so if we're going to prepare a text amendment and work with the commission on adopting a new regulation, that wouldn't be a problem. And I think it's a good idea.
What does everyone else
No.
think?
I think it's good for me.
Again, there's a lot more to consider before
Oh, this is baby step one
this is,
in my mind.
as I pointed out, this is non-binding, informal conversation, but that's my feeling on it. Anybody else have
Any
any
other-
other comments?
Yeah,
Okay,
a new zoning district would be better than changing the multifamily MFR. Also, I agree.
thank you.
Well, I think we incorporate the whole thing into, if we're going to reduce the MFR, we make a subcategory that could be
Specific for a single.
lower acreage, limited to single-family dwellings. And I think that would be a reasonable approach.
Okay. Any other comments?
Anybody
Okay.
else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Most people agree with the chairman?
We all do.
Yeah.
But again, this is a non-binding
No,
conversation.
I understand, but it's just, before we put a lot of time and effort into it, we need to get a sense of.
Any comments from staff on this?
Well, I mean, you're just looking at a raw concept of an idea of type of use, but there are other parameters of that use that you probably should consider if you do go down a path of converting commercial development zoning district to residential, such as affordable housing requirements and things like that. And, the other thing we did with the AR district, we looked at, we not only added that use, but we, or changed the density. We were looking at the physical dimensions on the site, because they're single family in the sense that they're detached buildings, but they're not separate lots. So there's
Right.
proximity issues and things like that that you want.
We had a density limit, I think.
Yeah, density limit, and then there was things in relation to the street and that serves it and all that, and whether there's a recreation component or some other component.
Yeah, but we're not there yet, right?
No, I'm saying that
Just to consider it?
there's more to than just the concept of changing commercial to residential. There are things that should be looked at as well to better understand whether this makes sense in the context of your POC. That's all.
Yeah, I was going, for the new commissioners, when we started with the AR reg, we had just one thing in mind, to permit single-family detached. By the time we got done, the regulation had been completely revamped. We really left no paragraph untouched. It's very similar to the MFR reg. They were written in the early 70s. Housing has changed considerably since the early 70s. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Kevin Soley, PE, 485 Pepper Street, discuss material storage.
Well, yeah, if you're gonna stay up till 10. I know.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering offices located at 501 Main Street here in Monroe. I'm here tonight we wanted to come in and talk about a potential project at 485 Pepper Street. With me here this evening are Joe Grasso Sr. and Joe Grasso Jr., who run a very successful road construction company based out of Norwalk that are looking to possibly expand some operations into Monroe. There's a piece of property at 45 Pepper Street, which you may be aware of. It's located across the street from, kind of across from Really Good Stuff. And what we're looking to do is We're looking to develop a facility here, which would be a manufacturing facility with some wholesale. So as road builders, what they do is they often have oftentimes surplus materials. And what they like to do is create a facility here that would actually process stone aggregates, and that manufacturing, manufacturing construction aggregates out of existing earth materials. And that operation would actually be proposed. The site's currently zoned Industrial 1. So what we propose to do is do this manufacturing operation within a building. And then we had an initial pre-application meeting with staff, and part of our discussion was that we would have this manufacturing operation, this processing materials within a building, and then in addition to that, there would be, we would like to provide for storage bins for construction aggregate materials that would be a result of the manufacturing and processing component of the operation. And we started to get into some discussion about, obviously the regulations have provisions and restrictions on the permitted outdoor storage associated with industrial uses and associated with any use for that matter. So what we started to get into is we started to look at the definitions of structure and building. And if you look at the definition of building, this is from the regulations, any structure having a roof supported by columns or walls and intended for the shelter, housing, or enclosure of persons, animals, or personal property. So what our initial concept was, what we would do is we would have the manufacturing processing, the manufacturing operation located in a structure towards the front of the property, and then we'd have the site itself steps down in grade where the existing elevation along Pepper Street and the primary area is at a certain elevation. Then there's a lower elevation as the grades drop down towards some existing wetland corridor towards the rear of the property. So we would look to actually take advantage of that and to construct some storage bins, which would be structures in buildings that would meet the definition of the Monroe regulations. And within these buildings, we would store and house materials. So there would be stockpiles of various construction aggregates and things within those buildings. And we had an interesting discussion during the pre-application meeting on whether or not those buildings would be considered indoor buildings or outdoor buildings. And for us, from an interpretation standpoint, again, if we were to develop the property and to propose bin storage within buildings, which would be a structure having a roof supported by columns or walls intended for the shelter of personal property, this commission would interpret that to be outdoor storage. We understand the limitations and the concerns about outdoor storage. We're trying to propose something that would eliminate those concerns and actually house this material within a structure, within a building. This commission actually recently approved a project, 154 Enterprise Drive, where we had proposed some outdoor storage bins or some structures essentially for the housing of materials. That was a little bit unique, but those structures included block walls around the perimeter and then an actual roof structure, so it would meet the definition of a building. That particular application, we didn't have to get into the discussion of whether or not it was a building or indoor or outdoor, because there were some other nuances to previous approvals on there where we didn't have to get into that discussion. But in terms of a new application, we were looking to get some feedback from the commission. Now, from a use standpoint, principal permitted uses in the zone, there is actual, item D is a principal permitted use in all industrial zones, commercial bulk storage completely contained within a building. That includes, and it clearly says materials must be stored within a building or structure, so this would actually be a principally permitted use, the storage of the materials. In addition to that, there's also the special exception uses which are allowed in all zones, which include manufacturing, compounding, assembling, and treatment of articles made principally from previously prepared materials. Again, we would be looking at a manufacturing facility where we're manufacturing small rocks out of big rocks, which would meet within that parameter. And then also a special exception use allowed in the Industrial 1 district is storage of building materials or construction equipment. So based on our review, we feel that there's certainly there can certainly be reasonable interpretations made of the regulations that what we're proposing would be permitted, but we did want to come to the commission first, get some initial feedback and thought to see if you shared that same interpretation or if you had some alternate interpretation.
I'm not gonna talk first because anyone else talks.
A question, are you gonna do walls or columns?
Well, it would actually be, these structures would likely be similar to what was previously proposed on other projects. They would actually be concrete block walls, and then there would likely be columns on top of those which extend to the roof support of the structure itself.
What materials are you planning to, or is it proposed, are you planning to process at this facility? Is it just stone?
It would be a processing facility where they would bring up materials kind of as a byproduct of their other operations. Those would go through a crushing operation and a screening operation to establish, construction aggregates, so various stone sizes, et cetera, which would be available for wholesale.
The storage facilities, they're gonna be open in the front?
They would be open in the front, yes.
Are they gonna be separated, so like bin 1 has process in it, bin 2 has something like that, and they're blocked off, or is it just one open?
It would likely have individual bins within it. That's kind of some of the design parameters that are still being worked out, but there certainly would be some separation of various products and materials.
Because when we discussed that the other one on Enterprise, that was every bin was separated from.
And that is the intent, because obviously in terms of handling materials and managing materials, they want to make sure everything's separated and segregated accordingly.
So basically, one of the buildings is gonna be for your operation, and the other one is gonna be storing the materials that come out of that manufacturing?
Correct, and again, this is a kind of a very preliminary.
Well, just rough, so
concept
say that
plan,
building
yeah.
right there in the middle is where they're gonna do their manufacturing,
Correct.
and then one of these other ones,
And
or
then
both of those would be
these
where
would
they
both be
store.
for storage of materials within the structure.
Oh, I'm done, my bad,
Okay.
sorry.
So these are three-sided with a roof?
Yes.
They're open in front.
How big do you think you want them to be?
In terms of square footage or height?
Square footage?
Well, these are actually, this lays out to, this is about a 10,000 square foot area. This is about a 7,500 square foot area, and then we'd have another potential smaller bin around 3,000 square feet here. Ultimately, they're looking for about 20,000 square feet of area for storage. Again, this is a very preliminary design. As we move forward into the design process, if this is received positively, we would be able to refine some of those.
Piggybacking on Leon, how tall are these?
These would likely be, I think 25 feet tall, well within the permitted building height. You can only have piles so large before they start to become difficult to manage.
Oh, of course.
And the one in the front's gonna be opened away from the street and the one in the back towards, or am I just kinda?
Well, so conceptually, the goal would be so that their operations, they also have a yard in Norwalk. They would be able to, ideally, they'd be able to have a truck come up, bring drop material to be processed, and then actually pick up some material to leave. These would both be kind of at a lower level, like a lower level. So this would be facing this way, this would be facing this way. But again, there's a 15 to 20 foot grade change between these two elevations.
Now, this facility's not full-time employees, they're gonna be open pretty much year-round?
Yeah, there's an existing home on the property, actually. It's currently being used for residential use. There's an existing building there which will be converted as part of this for some administrative offices. Ideally, from a phasing standpoint, they'd actually like to, in a potential future stage, actually construct a larger commercial building for, some additional operations inside the facility, maintenance and things like that.
Right, so they're gonna have full-time employees there?
Yes.
And they're gonna, is it a seasonal thing, or they're gonna go year-round?
I think it would be year-round, weather permitting.
Of course.
Yeah.
The processing happens inside a full standing structure
right?
Yeah, so this would be another, a full metal building. It would likely have some potential openings on the side for access for equipment and things like that. And again, but it's a structure and a building per the definitions of the zoning regs. But this would be full walls on this side and you know, here and likely on this side too, but there would potentially be some openings here for, just for
There's some
access.
big garage doors of some sort, right? To get
Yeah.
Big machines in. So.
Right.
Do they have the doors? Because at the pre-app you said they wouldn't have it.
Well, there could, I think we'd probably like some openings, but we could certainly incorporate, you know, I think there are probably some areas where we could have some overhead doors, but there would be, ideally, they'd like some flexibility to have some openness to that from an operations standpoint.
I'm assuming they're gonna need to get a backhoe in there or something to move.
Yeah, a
material
loader
or
to load the equipment into, yes, certainly.
Forklift of some sort.
Most likely loaders in terms of construction
So
equipment.
so big equipment,
Yeah.
bigger equipment.
Michael, anything?
So you're gonna process stone in the building that's mostly closed?
Correct.
Is there a lot of dust particles?
There would actually, as part of the building system, there would be dust suppression built into that, because obviously that'd be part of the operational requirements. There'd be scrubbers and things to make sure that those particulates are collected.
And it's, what is that, has to be 500 feet away from residential?
No.
Not from
That's
a,
No,
for
see,
processing land.
yeah, that's for as part of site work for a property. Any rock crushing operation or rock crushing that has to happen as part of the site work needs to be located 500 feet away from residential district.
Not
In
in
terms
this-
of a,
Not in this case.
Actually,
Well,
should
they're,
check.
they're proposing to classify the crusher as a
Manufacturing.
manufacturing process. But I think that would have to be inside an enclosed building. You could have barn door style openings, but I think my interpretation is it should be a four-sided or multi-sided enclosed structure.
mhm.
I don't want to cut off
Because of
my.
the noise, yeah. I mean, do you have
The whole
residential?
process.
This is all industrial, though.
This
isn't it?
this is all
No residential
industrial through here.
around
So
it.
this is 482 Pepper Street. Wait a minute, where am I? No, excuse me. This is Dado and Kids on the Moon and CrossFit in these two buildings here. This is industrial. This is 482 Pepper Street, which is 3 industrial buildings, and then Really Good Stuff is just south to here. So this is all industrial zone.
You have to, just so you understand, the questions that are being asked are those specific to this site, because that's the intent of the applicant. The questions would go across the board for everywhere, because it would relate to what is outdoor storage, what isn't outdoor storage, and wherever outdoor storage is permitted in town, whatever decision is made, not you're making a decision here, but whatever ultimate comes down to this, that would be binding everywhere, not just on this site. So you should bear that in mind when you're evaluating, you're evaluating.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to the question of if we're building a building per the definition of the zoning regulations and we're storing materials within that, would this commission possibly interpret that to be an outdoor storage
Well,
situation?
you referenced a previous application that you handled
Mhm.
where there was a similar type, you had a mafia block structure, but the inland wetlands required that it be covered. But that was all outside storage. Now, that was classified as outside storage, and if I remember, you had like a 54% allowance for outside storage on that lot.
That's correct.
So you fell within the parameters, even though you had a significant amount of outside storage. Even though it was block buildings, what you're referring to as buildings with columns and a roof, it was outside storage on that property. I don't see much difference with this, what you're proposing here. If these are going to be stacked block with a roof, with, you know, one long wall of the building open, I don't see that much more than covered storage bins in my interpretation. You know, if you want to classify it as a building, I think it has to be, I mean, in the definition, it says, one of the intended for the shelter, housing, or enclosure of persons, animals, or personal property. And, you know, enclosure in my thinking, means enclosed, you know, encapsulated, 4 walls, close the door, it's inside. Not a lean-to type structure with one full long wall open. I wouldn't necessarily classify that as indoor storage, personally. You also, the building that's going to house the manufacturing process, you're going to probably need some amount of outside storage for that. I imagine you're gonna stockpile outside and bring the material in.
Correct.
So again, that's playing on your 20% that you're allowed for outside storage on the property, 20% of your building. So, you know, it's a real gray area right now as to what actually classifies as a building with this proposal.
Well, hence the reason for us being here, and again, I just, it's difficult for us, as we read and interpret regulations, if we're reading the definition of building and what we're proposing meets within that definition, we're looking for something else in the regulations that tells us that we're interpreting it incorrectly. And I understand where you're coming from, but and that's kind of why we wanted to come here and discuss this with you, because again, we believe that, you know, to meet the definition of building, it doesn't need walls. It simply needs to have a roof supported by columns to meet the definition of a building per the zoning regulations.
According to that definition.
Right, which is the current definition in the zoning
You
regulations.
need a roof and columns.
Well, it's supported, but, you know, again, it's all, you know, semantics and who's going to interpret the grammar which way. I interpret the intent of that to be an enclosure. So that's, if you're asking my opinion, that's my opinion. A building is a roof and 4 walls that can be enclosed.
Okay. So, okay, so then, and that's a fair interpretation. I'm not looking to challenge you at all. I'm just clearly here to have the discussion because, you know, if my client needs some direction where the commission's going to say, no, we disagree with this, then they're going to have to go somewhere else because there's no way to.
Remember, I'm only one voice.
Of course.
On a commission of 8 people. So
Right.
I'm voicing my opinion. And I welcome the other members to do the same.
Why not a 4th wall?
Well, it's needed from an operations standpoint in order to get in and manage the materials.
Big garage doors, nothing like that, can't do that.
There's a couple components to that. There's operational components and there's cost components.
What's the, I'm assuming you have some sort of, what's going on the base of these storage units? Are you just gonna lay everything right on the raw land, or are you gonna put millings down, you gonna put a concrete down, is there gonna be, what's the thought process?
That's a trick question, we don't allow millings.
It's a trick question, Kevin, I'm just trying to figure this out.
You know, that could either have a gravel base, it could have a concrete slab, you know, those are kind of details.
What's the thought process so far?
Huh?
Where do you guys stand so far? What are you guys thinking so far?
I think it's slab.
We're really thinking of a concrete.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You wanna come up? Sorry.
Just your name and address for the record, please.
Joe Grasso Senior with Grasso Companies, Norwalk, Connecticut. The intention wasn't really to have a concrete base floor on either of the storage areas. It would be a concrete slab underneath the building area or underneath the processing area. Is that what you're asking, what the base would be?
Will you be processing asphalt?
Roadbed, asphalt, concrete. We're in the construction business, we're in the road business. We generate those types of materials.
So what are you thinking is gonna be on the base of those buildings?
On the base of the buildings would be just a compacted gravel base, or could be millings. That's all
We don't allow millings.
No.
It's a trick question.
A compacted gravel base.
We didn't get into those design discussions.
No,
Yeah,
that's
it's really preliminary.
That's why I
just,
said
yeah.
thought process.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if you thought about paving that area, I don't know what you're thinking about doing in that area.
Could be paved.
What?
It could be paved too.
It could be paved, is
Okay,
what he's
he's
saying.
with you
Would
on
have to
that.
be.
Yes.
But you really want that one long, to a wall to be open.
Correct.
Access.
In order to maximize the volume inside of a structure, it has to be open. You couldn't possibly get at the material if there was openings in the front of it.
And you're storing like piles of rocks, is that?
Processed materials.
Okay.
Yeah, to a size of about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches.
Obviously, garage doors don't work for you.
Barn doors would work.
That's
On
what-
a pre-engineered, well, this isn't a pre-engineered, no, building, this is a stack block storage bin.
For the storage buildings.
You two are fun.
Those storage buildings have no foundations.
That's not true.
They do.
Sure, if you have to support the roof, they'll need foundations.
But I mean, in the ground, there's no permanent foundation.
That's what I just.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, well, whether it's, there's a foundation associated with those blocks. The slab itself may not have, if we're not putting any loads on the slab, it may not necessarily need to be a concrete slab. But the perimeter walls that are supporting the structure would have foundations associated with them. And they'd be required to have building permits.
If you don't want to enclose them.
From an operations standpoint, that wouldn't be a feasible alternative to operate here. So it's kind of the limitation that we have. So if everyone on the commission should.
The other three walls are gonna be, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Wait, it's walls to columns to roof is what you said
Yes.
originally? How much column space are we talking about?
Typically, we've looked at in the past is, walls to 8 feet, 8 to 10 feet or so, and then columns above that to support the roof structure.
Okay, so you're gonna still have airflow going through basically?
There would be some, yes.
Okay.
So if we, the way you interpret it is, if we consider those as being structures or buildings, then you can increase your off-site storage on each of those buildings.
That's correct.
And they need it
So
for-
instead of having, 20%, you can have 20% for each building.
The total gross square footage on the
For each
property
building,
is,
that's
we'd be allowed 20% of that gross square footage for,
Of the building,
yes,
right, for each building.
correct.
for the type of
Right,
lights.
so your outdoor storage could get,
It would increase,
Well, you'd have to get into the then discussion of whether the storage buildings are accessory or principal. Because this 20% is based on the principal building. If they're all principal buildings, then it would be 20% of all three buildings. If the processing plant was the only principal building, then it's only that one. So that would be the next question.
yeah. And I think for our purposes, we would think that these would be principal buildings. As a principal permitted use, you're allowed to have commercial bulk storage within a building.
And then you'd have 20% plus outside storage.
Correct. So we'd have
Per-
essentially, we'd probably have multiple
Per
principal
building.
uses on the property.
So the big question is whether or not we would consider these three-sided with a roof structures, buildings, or outside storage.
Well, according to that definition, they're buildings.
The problem is you can see it both ways.
Well, what's the definition of shelter? Because if, air and
Exactly.
water is getting through, I'm kinda,
Well, we only have to worry about the definition of building.
well, yeah, but, and intended for the shelter, housing of enclosures, or enclosures of persons, so you're hung up on enclosures, I'm thinking shelter, how much shelter are you getting with walls and open air on four sides?
Well, it's obviously providing some shelter. It doesn't say it has to be completely sheltered or completely enclosed anywhere.
Right, it doesn't say it has to, it doesn't
No.
say, it's
So-
very,
If we don't prescribe it, then.
it's not very clear. That's the whole question. How is the commission going to interpret it in this particular instance?
Well, there has to be.
their primary question is, are we going to consider these buildings or outside storage? And again, this is non-binding, and I
Of
don't know
course.
if you're going to get a definitive answer tonight. But
Oh, and
it's-
again, that's
it's
why we're
very-
here.
It's unclear.
We're looking to take the pulse of the commission, so it seems like that's what we're looking for.
Well, if we want to encourage them to go forward with this project, then we would interpret it as a building.
Right.
If we don't
That's where
want
I
this
stand as
project,
well.
You could do that, but I just caution you a little bit to think about and not taking either side. Is that you're not looking at this site and these buildings particularly, because
in
you
isolation.
have to look at the
right.
permutations of what could be similar, and that's where you have to land. When is it inside, when is it outside? So this may be acceptable, but something else, like, you know, the gazebo outside, you know, that has a roof, that has columns, and that has some walls, but, you know, you have to decide, is that the same, is that okay? So that's when you're gonna have to define within your code, if it's okay, how it's okay.
And I'll reiterate that the same exact thing that you did on a previous application was classified outdoor storage.
Those didn't have roofs though, correct?
Yeah.
Well,
You're not
wasn't-
thinking of the wrong one.
Okay, something different, sorry.
and we can discuss that particular application if we want to get into it. That application had a variance for 54% outdoor storage. It was part of an outdoor storage area. Throughout the duration of the design process, the applicant decided that he wanted to put a roof and make that a building. And we simply didn't change the classification from outdoor to building structure.
Or you didn't need to in that.
Correct, exactly. We didn't need to have that discussion at that time. So that's kind of where that was, for what that's
We can
worth.
spin this 100 different ways.
I'm not looking to spin anything. I'm simply trying to read the black and white words and get an interpretation, and then look to see how the commission feels as well. I don't, there's no spin zone.
All right, well, does anyone else have anything to add or comment on?
So,
I know you don't have the good, warm, fuzzy feeling that you were hoping to have.
I'm not sure.
About having an answer, but I don't think we can give you a definitive answer tonight.
Again, I'm not looking for a definitive answer. I'm simply looking for some commissioners' opinions on how they would interpret this.
Okay.
And I understand it's non-binding, you know.
Okay.
It seems like Commissioner O'Reilly seems to agree that these would classify as buildings and be defined as buildings. I think Commissioner Bruno, I think I read that correctly. I think I understand your interpretation. You would not necessarily see that to be a structure. Commissioner Ambrosi?
You know, I'm sort of like, you know, I know what the intent of that was, and I know the way it's written, and I know how you can come up with just as three-sided walls and a roof. But, you know, the intent was as a building. And if you look up a building has 4 walls.
Not by your definition.
Now, I know not by our definition, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of on the fence.
Okay. Any feedback or direction from the last
I don't think it has to be an enclosure based upon the language.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that definition, it does clearly also say columns or walls, so, but then you're talking about other structures in town, are they considered buildings? There's, you know, you could pick one half of the sentence or the other half and argue it both ways.
Okay.
So I don't think I can give you a yes or no at all, even non-officially, because I could argue the point for you both ways, I think.
Okay. So I think I have a good handle on that. Can I ask, generally, would the commission see something like this in a favorable light or a negative light? Would they want to see this property invested and redeveloped in this capacity? Feel feel like we're playing
Well,
poker here.
We'd love to see the property.
I would love, yeah, I agree with
I got a bad
Commissioner
poker face,
Ambrosi.
can't be good.
I would love to see the property developed. I would love to see it get on the tax rolls.
Right.
I would love to see it, so there were no questions as to how it conformed to the regulations.
Right.
And right now, there's questions.
Like I said, you know, have 4 walls with like the barn doors or something like Bill was talking about. I think that wouldn't be too much of a problem. You know, I'm saying, because you gotta understand that, you know, we can look at this, and we said, something doing this and leave it open, and this can happen throughout everywhere. And, you know,
And it does entitle you, if these were classified as buildings, it entitles you to a significant amount of additional outside storage.
right.
So it's, I think you'd be getting outdoor storage on top of your outdoor storage in this scenario. That's my read on it.
Okay. Would this be an instance where the commission would get some feedback from the town attorney
What do you mean?
regarding the
I don't think,
interpretation?
I mean, this is an informal,
It's informal.
No, I mean, if this were to move forward, obviously.
um,
I'm-
well, we would probably get to that point, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I would think so.
Okay.
Especially if the commission, or the majority of the commission had questions about the appropriateness of the application, it would definitely be going to the town attorney.
Okay, great.
I mean, if the majority of the commission had no issue, and I wouldn't want to waste the taxpayers' dollars on it if, you know, it was a moot point.
As a resident, I thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, public hearings. We have one continued and one new. So, seeing as we have a new one, I will read the rules for a public hearing. There are 2 sets of microphones for both public address and recording of the proceedings. Due to the need for recording, it is important to stand at the microphone at all times and speak into it loudly and clearly in order that everyone in the room can hear and to capture what is being said. Individuals speaking from the seats will not be heard and will not be recognized to speak. Rules and procedures of hearing. Order of the hearings of an application. Points of order and responses will be entertained. Exhibits will be read for the record. Applicant and/or representatives will present the application and will answer commission questions. The floor will be open to those in favor. The floor will be open to those opposed. The floor will be open to general comments or questions. The floor will be open to the applicant, who may take the opportunity for closing remarks or rebuttal, after which discussion will close. The applicant or his representatives are the final speakers. No comment shall be accepted from anyone unless recognized by the chair. All questions and comments shall be addressed to the chair, who will determine if an answer shall be provided and by whom. There shall be absolutely no discussion between speakers and audience. The commission has no intention to limit the right of any person to speak, but asks that the speakers try not to be repetitive. Please try to present new information. If something has been said before, the commission would invite you to indicate your agreement with previous speakers. At no time shall there be displays of emotion, such as applause, cheering, shouting, or similar noise. This is critical as this hearing is being recorded. If this happens, you will be cautioned. A vote or demonstration by a show of hands, standing by the audience, or similar action will not be recognized. All parties are requested not to talk between themselves while the hearing is in progress. If you feel the need to talk, please step out into the lobby. All speakers, when recognized, must advance to the microphone to speak. Please state your name and address for the record. The chairman reserves the right to cut off discussion if it is not relevant to the application or is presented in an inappropriate manner. This is a legal proceeding, much the same as what would occur in a courtroom setting. We request that all parties observe the proper decorum that would be observed in that setting. Please turn off all cell phones or similar devices. If you have a need to use these devices, please leave the room and use them outside. All right, Will, do we have new exhibits?
Yeah.
Oh, well, first, SCP 2017-11, file number 1594A, 124 Enterprise Drive, Assessor Map 94, Lot 17, I-2 District. Special exception permit application proposing an outdoor storage facility for zoning 4.3.4, M&J Vadera LLC. Now, do we have any new?
Yeah, and exhibit number 38, email correspondence from the applicant's attorney to Attorney Fracasini. Exhibit 39, time extension grant from the applicant. And exhibit number 40, a memorandum letter from the applicant attorney to the Planning and Zoning Commission dated January 10th, 2018. That is all.
Okay, for the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Schellenberg. I'm an attorney with Cohen & Wolf in Bridgeport, and I represent the applicant. As mentioned, the only new submission that we had was a legal memo that Attorney Sullivan and I submitted last week, and that was in response to the letter of opinion that Attorney Fracasini had submitted back in December. At the last hearing on this matter, Attorney Sullivan addressed the law regarding interpretation of regulations, and in accordance with that law, urged the Commission to construe Section 8.2.2E in a manner that would lead to a rational and reasonable result by allowing the applicant to use portable toilets instead of requiring installation of a septic system when there is no building proposed for this project. As you know, the applicant is only seeking a special permit for outdoor storage pursuant to Section 4.3.4G of the regulations, so there is no need or practical reason to require a septic system under these circumstances. The legal memo that we filed last week addressed that issue again, and as I said, responds to Attorney Fracasini's opinion. He also gave an opinion regarding the applicability of Section 1.9.2E1, and as we pointed out in our memo, the storage bins that will be used for the outdoor storage are not temporary structures. They are permanent structures. There's no time limit set for their existence. It's not as though they're there for a short duration and then will be replaced by something else. They are the permanent structures that are meant to remain on the site indefinitely for as long as the site will be used for outdoor storage. So that really summarizes our position, I think, on the legal issues that remained open. And I'm, of course, happy to answer any of the questions that the Commission may still have. And Kevin Soley, our engineer, is here as well if there are questions for him on any of the engineering matters.
Do you have to have porta potties there?
We're required to have some sanitary disposal, and that would meet the requirements of the state code.
What, the state code requires that?
Yes.
Even in the temporary, where workers are only dropping things off and picking them up?
Well, I think I don't believe there's a statutory requirement. I think, we wanted to address it in some way, and based on our discussions with the health department. Again, I'm sorry, it's Kevin Soley for the record, Soley Engineering, 501 Main Street here in Monroe.
Would an alternative
That was the
be,
recommendation of the health department.
Yeah, the health department said it was sufficient based on.
what if you just didn't have any at all? And they used the bathroom down at the diner before they came in or when they had to leave?
I mean, based on the operations of the facility, there's no permanent, employees that are gonna be stationed there
So
throughout
why
the
do you
day.
need porta potties at all?
I think we wanted to do it as a gesture to address some of the comments from staff early on about providing a means for someone to use the
It
facilities
doesn't
when
look like
needed.
it's working though.
Hmm?
The road you're going down doesn't look like it's working out.
Well, I think that comes back to some of Barbara's points regarding the legal interpretation and some of the case law she cited about the, that one condition that's at the, I guess, primary concern.
Right, as we stated, we think that's a reasonable interpretation of the regulation under these circumstances, because, again, there's no need for it. As you point out, there may rarely be a need for the portable type toilets, but again, we're trying to address any concerns in
And I
that
think we're
regard.
trying to avoid portable toilets. So if there's no need for portable toilets and we want to avoid portable toilets, why don't you just dispense with the portable toilets?
And if that's what the commission thinks is appropriate, I think that's something we
I'm just saying it might work
could
rather
do.
than arguing back and forth for the next several months until spring gets here and they want to start using the property.
Right,
This argument's been going on for a while.
right.
Well, I think the issue came back to the one standard condition associated with special exception permits that says that safe sanitary sewage disposal will be provided. So
Is that the Board of Health or is that you saying that?
That's the
our
regulation, right?
regulation.
We were trying to address the regulation, but I think it does come down to how the commission would interpret it. If the commission doesn't feel under these circumstances that there's anything required for safe sanitary sewage disposal, I think that's the commission's province. But that is how we thought was an appropriate interpretation based on our conversations with the health department.
It's pretty clear that a portable toilet is a temporary facility, and our regulations clearly limit the time that a portable facility can be used on the site. That was number one. And number two is this 8.2.2, which says sanitary facilities shall be by means of a sewer treatment plant or subsurface sewage. But I didn't consider the fact that if there were no facilities on site, and I don't know if that would fall into our regulations. Do we?
Well, one question might be, what does OSHA require for this use? If any?
OSHA, I don't believe OSHA requires permanent or sanitary facilities if there's no long-term or extended employee activity on the site. It's for short durations and it's for.
Do you think or you know?
But I would also like to point out the fact that the state of Connecticut, as well as many municipalities around the state that have passive recreation areas, have toilet facilities. There's no other buildings. They have toilet buildings. So, it's not unheard of to have a building that just houses sanitary facilities. The state and many municipalities put them in instead of using porta potties. So I don't think it's something that is unheard of or has never been done. It's done quite frequently where there's no other structure on the property other than a toilet facility.
But of course, those are situations, I think, what you're describing, where there is continuous use. And of course, as was pointed out, this is more a pickup, drop-off type of situation. So I think that should be taken into account. But I also wanted to address, when you were talking about temporary structures, were you referring to 1.9.2E1 in that regard?
I don't want to say yes without looking at it.
Okay. because I wanted to address that. I want to know if he's looking at this regulation, he's saying they're temporary structures, because I don't think it fits into this definition.
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, so I don't think that the portable toilets would fit into that regulation, because it talks about mobile or temporary structures should not be permitted for use as dwelling, storage, or for the purpose of conducting a business on any lot. So I don't think the
Well,
toilets.
for a truck driver to use a temporary facility is part of conducting business on that lot. Otherwise, he would not be on the lot. You know, it's,
Different kind of business, but
yeah,
yeah.
but
you're doing the
it's
business.
related to the business use of that property.
Okay. If, I'd like to,
Kevin, before you do that,
oh,
I think it may boil down to the temporary issue of the porta potty. And if the use was defined in such a way that there was no need for the septic system, I just looked at the preamble sections for a special exception permit, which, you know, when you look at a code, we should look at the entire code. And in section 8.1.5, under determination of commission, there is the subparagraph C4, which says that the general standards and supplemental standards, and the general standards is the one we're talking about, for specific uses enumerated in 8.2 as applicable are satisfactorily met. I'm not making a legal interpretation here, but that may give you more discretion to determine whether for the use, the septic system as set forth in the general standards is applicable to this use or not. Now, that just goes to whether you need a septic system or not for the use. I think if you then determine that one isn't needed, you might have that ability. If you determine one is required, then you're kind of stuck with that list, and then we get into that whole issue of whether it's a temporary structure or not. And it's certainly not one of those uses.
What do you, 8.1.5, what?
8.1.5 C4. It basically is, in approving a special exception permit, the commission shall determine 1 through 4. And 4 says that the general standards, ... for specific uses enumerated in 8.2 of these regulations, as applicable, are satisfactorily met. So the term as applicable, I suppose, could be,
So we could strike that whole later paragraph as not applicable.
Right.
well,
and
you would have to base that on some understanding that the use did not require a sanitary septic system because of the operational aspects. I mean, the operational aspects should be well defined to make that determination, but, and then if you go beyond that, obviously that would be different. So I think that might, again, I'm not telling you from a legal perspective, but that is something else that we could think
So
of.
if it's not applicable, then you can dispense with the whole porta potty issue.
and I will say, in accordance with OSHA section 1926.51C4, the requirements of this paragraph for sanitation facilities shall not apply to mobile crews having transportation readily available to nearby toilet facilities. So it is not required as part of OSHA for this particular use.
So what are you proposing?
So you are, that, when you say that, Kevin, you're meaning that there are no on-site employees, they're all coming on a truck and leaving with that same truck?
correct.
Yeah, mobile crews having transportation readily available.
Well, I know, but mobile means that they're not at, no one's ever at the, they're at the site, but they're never,
For very short periods of
Well,
time,
I know.
just for
They're coming with
drop
the
off
truck.
and pick
they're
up.
doing their out thing and then they're
Move
leaving.
material.
Right,
They're not there waiting for a truck to come.
correct.
So what are you proposing?
Well, if, I guess let's take a step back. So there are a number of balls in the air here. We have the general requirement, the general condition that says you have to provide safe sanitary disposals through a subsurface leaching field or sewer. I believe based on Planner's Aggress's comment under 8.1.5 C4, the commission has the ability to waive that specific requirement as applicable if we've demonstrated that we don't need it. So we believe that we do not need any permanent bathroom facility. We've also demonstrated that OSHA doesn't require any temporary bathroom facilities. So we would be happy to eliminate and remove the application. We would then be back with an application that proposes the simple outdoor storage of raw materials in accordance with the zoning regulations section, it's right here. Article 8, subsection G of the section.
So you're proposing to eliminate the porta potties entirely?
Yes. And then there would not be any way considered a temporary structure based on Attorney Fraccassini's opinion letter.
And from technical terms, you use the word waiver, it really would be a determination that it's not applicable,
Correct. And
as opposed to a waiver.
thank you for that clarification.
I just want to clarify one thing, so as not to mislead the commission in any way. Attorney Fraccassini did take the position that the storage bins are temporary. But again, I don't think that's a reasonable interpretation at all, because they are the permanent structures that are meant to be there indefinitely. So I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and in fact, and even to further support that, the rear wall of these bins throughout this location here are actually a retaining wall. So that would essentially make the same argument that a retaining wall constructed on a piece of property is a temporary structure, which we do not believe to be the case.
Well, a permanent structure is something that's affixed to the ground.
Again, I could pull up the definition of structure, and actually, this meets the definition of structure. And actually, I will.
Well, I did pull up the definition
So
of
does the
permanent
porta
structure. A permanent structure is affixed to the ground.
It could just be resting on the ground as well.
Yeah,
This has concrete walls on 3 sides, correct?
correct. And a retaining wall itself.
Well, I hope it's
The other
permanent,
thing-
because that's the principal use.
Yeah,
So you don't plan on having any full-time employees on that property?
no,
So there's not gonna be anybody working on that property?
no. They'll bring material in, they'll dump it, someone will get out, they'll use a loader to put it in the
So
correct
you'll
bin.
have
and
an
then they'll
employee there on the property, I mean,
No, the guy who's driving
No,
the truck.
Right.
the driver will
a loader? will-
push
Right.
it into the pile and then leave.
The only thing that's gonna be on the property is the materials and the loader.
Correct.
And then they
Because
drive
if
the
you
truck
had a
in.
full-time employee, I mean,
different
by
story.
law, you have to have some kind of a septic.
Right, and we wouldn't have that, but we're not proposing that from a use standpoint. There's no reason for a full-time employee to spend any extended duration on this property. Any activity that would be done could be done in a short-term duration and would not need any kind of long-term.
Okay, do you have anything else to add?
No, if there are no further questions.
Well, I didn't say there's no further
Yeah.
questions.
Oh,
I said,
okay.
do you have
There's-
anything else to add?
We're happy
I
to consider or respond to any questions or comments the commission may have.
All right, start down at the end.
Oh, what's that
I'm a little new to this, so I kind of missed the beginning, but you guys have talked about this, I'm assuming, a couple meetings?
Yes,
maybe?
and if you haven't listened to the tapes,
Yeah.
you won't be
Yes.
able to really.
Exactly, so I will
Pass.
pass.
I think Will's interpretation will give this project the best result and is appropriate where no portable toilet is necessary, no septic system is necessary.
I agree. I don't.
No, right now, we're just seeing if you have any
I
questions.
don't have any questions.
No more questions.
Open piece of land. No more questions.
Should we have Jack weigh in on this?
That's to your pleasure.
Yeah, I like to see that.
I have no questions. I understand what is being proposed is eliminating the sanitary facilities altogether. I would just like to have Attorney Fraccassini just weigh in on, make sure that we're not overlooking something
Certainly.
from our side.
John Fraccassini, I have an office at 188 Main Street in Monroe, Connecticut. At the time that I wrote this opinion, I was the town attorney for Monroe. My function right now is that I have status as a special counsel, so I'm still handling this matter. A couple of comments. One of the comments in the memorandums that were submitted by counsel on behalf of the applicant made reference to the fact that I did not have the original memorandum that was submitted, I believe, by Attorney Sullivan at the time that I did my opinion, and that is correct. The second memorandum, which is dated January 10th of 2018, and before I forget, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Solly in regards to the OSHA comment, but you know, without doing more research, I think the commission has to understand that once you get the concept of a workplace and OSHA makes a determination of that fact, then I think you've got problems. But having said that, the fact that I was asked, as far as 1.9.2 is concerned, to see if the temporary structures, quote unquote, the porta potties were, you know, referenced as to whether that was applicable to the application. So I'll respectfully disagree with counsel in regards to the firm's interpretation of what I said. Secondly, in regards to what I was asked by the commission was whether the general provisions that apply to all special exception permits, once the commission made a determination that the application was in conformity with the regulations of the commission, whether the general provisions as set forth in 8.2.2.4 applied. And my opinion was yes, and I have not changed that opinion. Now, based on what Mr. Agresta has brought up tonight, the commission feels within its discretion that the elimination of the porta potties and basically the memorandum on January 10th basically put forth a position that there was no need for the porta potties to begin with based on what they have stated. Then it's up to the commission, I think, in its discretion whether the statutory section, or not statutory regulation section that Mr. Agresta put forth allows itself the determination, making a decision to go ahead with the project as it is proposed. My only other question is, was this application the intent of the applicant to remediate or to remedy violations that existed on the property? Because while I was town attorney, there were a list of properties in this area. This is one of the properties that had violations on it. So my question is, that I would bring up is was this an intent of the applicant to remedy the situation that existed on the property because of those violations?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Because I needed to find that out, because that is in the same sections that Mr. Agresta mentioned.
Okay.
So, any questions?
Any questions?
I have a question for Mr. Solly.
Well, no, do you have any questions? No.
Not for him.
Hold on. You have any questions for Attorney Fracasini? All right, thank you, Zach. Mr. Solly?
Yes,
Where'd you get that regulation from that you read from OSHA?
from the OSHA requirements. I can pull up the website again and I can give you
You
that.
got it from the OSHA website?
Yes. From the United States Department of Labor, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And it is, again, the section regarding, here we go. Section 1926.51C4. Again, so paragraph C.
No, you got it from their website, that's their
Yes.
regulation. That's all I needed, thank you.
Yep.
No, we did Jonathan, we got Bruno.
I'm all set.
Any questions?
I'm all set.
Michael?
No.
Okay. Well, Mr. Solly, let's see if anyone from the public has any comments.
Great.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone who is opposed to this application? Anyone with a general question or comment? Okay, seeing none, back to you, Mr. Solly.
Thank you. I guess if there's nothing else from the commissioner, from staff, I guess before I kind of do my summation, is there anything else from staff that we need to discuss?
Well, the only thing that I would add information before you get to the public comment is, or to the end of this thing is that the bond recommendations for 23,000.
I'm sorry, how much?
Bond recommendation, 23,000.
23,000, does the applicant agree with that, Mr. Solly?
Yes, the applicant does.
Anything else? All right, just so the commission knows, we're out of time on this. We have to close this hearing tonight. So we cannot introduce any new material after we close it. So if you have any other questions, now is the time to bring them up.
So just in summation, again, this project is for an application for outdoor storage of materials at 124 Enterprise Drive in Monroe. As Attorney Fracasini pointed out, this was done as part of a remediation for zoning issues on the property. This project has received approvals from the Inland Wetlands Commission, which also addressed wetland violations. We're seeking approval from this commission for, again, outdoor storage, which would remediate and clean up any violations on the property. You know, we've had multiple public hearings on this. We've had extensive discussion. We've had legal opinions on both sides. We feel what we've proposed complies with the Plan of Conservation and Development. It complies with the Monroe zoning regulations. We feel that we've adequately demonstrated that. The design has been done in accordance with all of the applicable Town of Monroe zoning regulations. It complies with the 2004 Water Quality Manual as provided by DEEP. It complies with the 2002 Soil Erosion Sediment Control Manual as provided by DEEP. We have implemented as many best management practices as we can for this project. I think we've offered extensive testimony for the record that has been uncontested or unchallenged by any other professionals regarding the design of the site, and we respectfully request the Commission's approval.
And just to reiterate, the project as submitted with the elimination of porta potties or any sanitary facilities.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
All right, nothing else? You good? Okay, Will, Scott?
I just want to remember, was the last representation with regards to remediation a 2-year window?
Excuse me?
Was your last representation as a project for remediation was a 2-year window?
I don't recall. You mean when, I don't recall exactly when the last zoning.
I'm glad you brought that up, Will, because there was, your client brought up in one of the previous hearings that he was looking to phase this project in over 2 years. We need your inland wetlands violations. I think there's a time frame on that, isn't there?
The wetlands approval was a multi-phase thing. There's an element to it which is the remediation, and then there was an element which is part of it, which was the approval of the development itself. So just give me a second, see if I could.
I apologize, and yes, I think the last time we were before this commission was in November, and then with the holidays and such, there was a little bit of a gap since we're here now today, so I've refreshed my recollection. Yes, the applicant has requested some time to implement this from a cost standpoint, so we did request a little bit of a larger window to complete these improvements. We did request 2 years, but again, obviously, we've offered that to the commission. And
well, I want to see what inland wetlands is looking for.
So inland wetlands, I believe there was, and Scott's confirming.
Yeah, so it said that it's talking about the remediation work, and it says that since the violation has been issued and it was tied to a citation, Commission requested site stabilization or restoration either through remediation plan or development approval. This new development work shall commence within 60 days of the initial 180-day allowance for meeting applicable conditions of approval of this approval letter. Conversely, the site shall be permanently stabilized or restored within 240 days until such time that the development work is commenced. So what they're saying is they wanted the work to start pretty much immediately, and if it didn't, that they then wanted, if the applicant has the option of waiting, they can wait 2 years to do it, but if they do, they want them to go in and stabilize it, topsoil seed, get it so that it's stable, not eroding, and then at a later date, they can continue with development.
Can you clarify what they meant by stabilization? You meaning cease everything they're doing and change it to grass?
Yeah, I don't believe that was the discussion. I think a lot of the discussion at wetlands actually was obviously the current state of the property, and if there was any evidence of erosion or instability, and I think
Well,
we've.
let me clarify. Stabilized, if there are areas of crushed stone, for instance, I would consider that to be stable.
Right.
It's not going to erode. It would not need to be grass. If there is an area of, where the stumps
Exposed
are,
dirt,
and it's just
right.
dirt and mud, then that would have to be stabilized.
All erosion and sedimentation control measures have to be in place.
Yeah, and it would be a judgment call by me, but yes, you'd be allowed to have, if there's a pile of stone, that's stable.
Okay.
All right, so any approval would be contingent upon you meeting the terms of the inland wetlands approval?
Of course.
Okay. Now are we good?
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, Will.
Yeah, thank you, Will.
Go ahead, Leon.
Now, you're in agreement that you're not gonna have any full-time employees on that property?
Yes.
So that if we approve this, we're gonna probably put that in our stipulations on the approval, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no permanent
I'm just saying
employees.
that so that we're all clear on the same, because it goes with the property, it doesn't go with the people that own it. I mean, so as long as you're in agreement with that, because if they sell it to somebody else.
Well, it's part of the approval.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, no, I just wanted to make sure that he was in agreement.
Yes.
with that. Okay.
Well, no full-time or part-time employee,
Well, they're gonna be on the property
in and out.
in and out. to do
Transitory.
what they need to do. Anything else? We're good. Mr. Solly, we're good?
We're good, thank you very much.
Closed. 8:33 PM.
Hey, Bill,
Thank you.
can we take just a quick break?
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess. I talked to him last week, we set up. Okay, it is 8:47, we are back in session. Next up, item number 7. Planning and Zoning Commission, Monroe, Connecticut, notice of public hearing to be held on January 18th, 2018. In accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 8-7D, a public hearing will be held in the Town Hall Council Chamber, 7 Fan Hill Road, Monroe, Connecticut, on Thursday, January 18th, 2018, at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter, concerning the following: SCP 2017-12, file number 1595A, Fan Hill Road, Residential and Farming District 1, Historic District. Special exception permit application for extension of new public sidewalk from Town Library, passing through Washington Lodge, 1 Fan Hill Road, and ending upon Town Hall, 7 Fan Hill Road, in association with State of Connecticut Department of Transportation Roundabout Project 84-108. Town of Monroe, Washington Lodge number 19, Ancient Free, and State of Connecticut. Complete details and copies of all related materials associated with the above matters are on file and available for view in the Monroe Planning and Zoning Department offices. Okay. It's all yours, Will.
Good evening. Will Agresta, Planning and Zoning Administrator, also representing for tonight will be Scott Sarchline, the town engineer, as well as Jack Fraccassini, special counsel to the town. As was noted earlier in tonight's meeting, there is another item on this agenda that's related to this, which is town council municipal referral under 824 for the extension of the public sidewalk, which is the subject of this public hearing for For purposes of expediency and streamlining, we will talk about them both together. They are two separate things, though, as far as you're concerned. You would have to make a recommendation relative to the 824 referral separately from the SEP application. For the record, for the special exception permit application, the exhibits include the special exhibit number 1, special exception permit application with project narrative. Exhibit number 2, 5 plan set from the Connecticut State DOT. And exhibit 3, a butters notice with a butters list. Exhibit 4, the 824 referral notice is within the file. Exhibit 5, fire marshal comments. Exhibit 6, building official comments. Exhibit 7, chief of police comments. And Exhibit 8 is a copy of the easement that's involved in the project across the Washington Lodge property, which is 1 Fan Hill Road. That is signed by Washington Lodge. All that remains would be the town's signature for that, and that obviously is part of the project in the 824 referral. For description of the projects, the town engineer will provide that description to you. Okay, Scott.
For the record, Scott Schatzline, town engineer. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm going to follow try to quickly follow the project narrative that you guys got in your packet. So if you want to read along as I go. But this is somewhat of a unique project. Comes to the town from the state of Connecticut. The state has received some additional funds that were originally budgeted for the Monroe Turnpike corridor. This goes back several years ago, quite a few years ago. And those funds were reallocated. They took those funds and offered them to the town initially, but only if the town had a specific project that was ready to bid, which we didn't have a project conveniently sitting on the shelf. So they then, it defaulted to the state of Connecticut. They received additional funds with the understanding that they were supposed to be or try to utilize those funds for improvements along or in the area of Monroe Turnpike. I received information about that from the MetroCog, the Council of Governments, and was asked if there were any public improvements needed or a possibility of any public improvements along this area. And I suggested that one of the things that they could look at would be to extend the sidewalks, which were originally discussed as part of their concept meetings that they had when they first started the roundabout project. So this all relates to the roundabout project because the state of Connecticut has agreed with that thinking and are offering to extend these sidewalks at no cost to the town as part of that current roundabout project. They're planning to do that through means of a change order, and therefore time is of the essence. They want to move quickly with this and finish up their design and look at possible construction as early as this spring or summer. So it's at no cost to the town. Design is all through the state of Connecticut as well. But because this is a SEP and an 824, we are proposing it as, from the town perspective, as a town project, even though the state will be doing it. Existing conditions, the affected area is residential and farming district 1, RF1, and it also falls within the Center Historic District. We will be bringing this proposal to the Historical Commission. A public hearing will be or is scheduled for that next month, early February. The affected area is not within 500 feet of the town boundary, and it is not subject to conservation easement. It's located within the Far Mill River public watershed, and we've made the appropriate notices to the Commissioner of Public Health, State Commissioner of Public Health, and the Aquarian Water Company as part of the application process. The project is for extension of a concrete sidewalk, and that will extend from the driveway on, that services the exit of the library. So it'll go from the north side of that driveway up along Monroe Turnpike up to the Washington Lodge property. It'll cross the driveway, cross their front yard onto Fan Hill Road, run along Fan Hill Road, and terminate via a handicap ramp into the main entrance and exit drive to the town hall. It'll also tee off just before that and run down the, or through the lawn area. There's a lawn between Washington Lodge and the parking lot for along the main entrance to the town hall. Sidewalk will run along there all the way to the service drive that runs parallel across the front of town hall. At that point, there'll be another handicap ramp for crossing to the sidewalk that's directly entering into the southerly entrance to the town hall. In the process of trying to design for that ramp and trying to accommodate ADA requirements, they're also proposing a small retaining wall that will, in red, that will cover up a little bit of the exposed, there's a utility vault there that would become a little bit more exposed. They have agreed to make that wall out of fieldstone to match the other fieldstone walls in the area. So to keep the historical significance or stay in harmony with what's in the center area, we thought the fieldstone would be the best route to go. I'm just reading through this quickly because I kind of summarized much of it. I just want to see if I didn't miss anything. As Will indicated, there is also a need on Fan Hill Road to procure a what we call dedicated easement, and that will be across the front of the lodge property, and the property will remain theirs, but it will be dedicated for public improvements so the sidewalk can be installed in that area. In response to the fire marshal's comments, there is a hydrant just to the north side of, I guess it's right about at the property line between Town Hall and the Lodge property. There is a hydrant there. That hydrant will be relocated or reset so that it's not an obstruction in the sidewalk. The plan calls for typically a green belt that will be a grass area between the roadway and the sidewalk. So you have a minimum of 5 foot. In some areas it reaches 8 to 10 feet. But there'll be a grass area, concrete sidewalk, and then matching the lawn area on the building side. The extension of the sidewalk is consistent with the 2010 Plan of Conservation and Development, providing expanded access and public safety. The location, nature, and height of the existing buildings and structures on the affected properties will not change in any way, and no new buildings or alterations of any existing buildings are proposed. No lighting is proposed, and the new sidewalk does not include components which would generate impacts by reason of glare, intensity, or flashing light, fume, smoke, dust, vibration, or noise. Existing sanitary sewage and water supply facilities remain unaltered. Existing parking will not be impacted or reduced. Project is an extension, well, I've already gone into that, but it's an extension of the roundabout project, Project 84-108. It is not anticipated to generate significant new demands for police, fire, and emergency services. And the new sidewalk will increase the amount of maintenance required by the town. So although the state is installing the sidewalk, the town will have the responsibility for maintenance. The town has already agreed in the roundabout project to provide maintenance from Town Hall area all the way down to the roundabout and completely around the roundabout. So that will be a town responsibility to keep up with the sidewalk maintenance and the landscaping within the roundabout circle area. There will be no changes to other public facilities necessitated by the proposed alterations. And I've already discussed the wall and that end of things. The project schedule, as I said, the design, they're hoping to complete the design late February, March, and they're looking to do the construction sometime this summer. That's basically the project, if there's any questions. Or, Jack, did you have anything specific you wanted to say about this? I was here to answer any questions. Like I said, you have something specific.
For the record, John Fracassini again. The process that was started when the state approached the town was to make sure, because the state was looking to see if the town was going to approve the project, so we implemented a schedule for the 824 to go to the council to get that, to get their approval, to send it over to the commission for your consideration. It was also determined that because of the property designation that the town hall campus is involved in, that an SCP was required and that reference was going to be made, a referral made to the Historic District Commission. We have, as Scott said, I drafted and negotiated a easement agreement with the Masonic Lodge, which is, their executive board approved it, it's already been signed. It's waiting for the signature of the first selectman, but that was going to be done, obviously, if all the approvals came in and the project would go forward. But that's been done, and that's the time schedule. We had discussed making sure that we could get this done to give the state the time so they could get everything scheduled. So that's the reason when we got the project, to implement the schedule to go to all the applicable bodies and get the approvals and consideration of the project itself. Any questions?
Any questions, anybody? No.
Just to read, on this sketch, the blue is the sidewalks that are part of the roundabout project, and the yellow is the portion that we're talking about now. It basically would come up from, the sidewalk is, at this point, is from the roundabout project originally was going to terminate at the driveway to the library, and so the new portion would extend through the driveway along the frontage of Monroe Turnpike. It would then turn along Fan Hill across the Washington Large property, enter along the Town Hall property, and then come along the driveway in the parking lot here, and then it would drop down and cross opposite the crosswalk that leads to this side of the building. So we'd have a complete pedestrian way along here and help serve some of the green area as well.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there is a idea to put some benches and other landscaping, but that was a separate work that the Parks Department was interested in. That'll come at a later date.
That's on town hall property.
Town hall property, yeah. Another issue is that one of the reasons they looked at extending this would also not only provide linkage along the town roads, state and town road, but it also provides a much safer access from the lodge's parking lot over to the green area. So when they have the events, a lot of people will park in that parking lot, and they're walking across the lawn, and they're walking in Fan Hill Road, and the hope is that it'll get them off the roadway and onto a safer sidewalk to get over to the farmer's market and things like that.
Okay. Start down at the end. Any questions?
How far down does it go, the sidewalk past the?
Down here,
Yeah.
it doesn't really go much past the
Pretty much
first
end.
property.
Ends right there.
Yeah.
You consulted the building officials' comments regarding the Americans with Disability Act and all the concerns that he raised.
Yeah, this is all
Regarding-
relatively flat, and at the crosswalks, there'll be the typical ramps that need ADA permits.
Yeah,
These are all according to DOT standards and, they'll be constructed according to those standards.
Was that has some sloping is near that retaining wall where he's showing right on the end near the town hall entrance. But that'll be graded, that's why they're grading that so that it meets ADA.
No other question?
No question.
No question.
I have no questions. So if you have nothing else to add at this point, is there anyone in the audience here who would like to speak in favor of this application? See some movement in the back. What's that?
Speak in favor and ask a question.
You can ask, I don't know if it'll be answered.
Okay. John Kimball, 1428 Monroe Turnpike. I think it's a fantastic idea to provide connectivity and the extra sidewalks to make the Monroe Green area more walkable green. My question just related to why or whether they consider bringing the sidewalk across the road and through the lawn area instead of taking all the trees down between the Washington Lodge and the parking lot, go to the area on the other side of the drive.
Okay.
Was that and if, I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but thank you very much for.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who is in opposition to this application? Any general questions or comments? Yes, sir. Hello, Mr. Bonoski. Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Ron Bonofsky, 76 Holly Place, Monroe. It's hard to be for or against this project because I don't know what precipitated the need for a sidewalk in that area. It's going to considerably, in my opinion, reduce the green mass we can see, which is part of the character and the country rural look of Monroe. We've already put a number of parking lots, taken a number of trees down, and have reduced what is called the rural look. That's one of the few characters Monroe has that doesn't cost us any money to maintain and is little by little disappearing from Monroe. I'm the president of the Grange right now. We interview a lot of people when they come to our fairs, and one of the questions we ask is, what did you hear about us? We've had people come in from Stratford, and they've recently commented, what are you doing to this place? One of the reasons we come up here, infrequently as our fairs are, but they come up here because they says it's a nice ride in the country, if you can believe it. I remember when it was really country. And they're disappointed in the overall effect, development, That's sidewalks, stone walls, and characterizations of stone walls that don't look like stone walls at all to anybody who knows what a stone wall looks like and knows that it's made out of stone and not cast concrete. And that's what we're putting all over this area. We are destroying the character of the green. The surveys that were put out when we were planning for the last POCD was what's the biggest advantage and the thing people most like about Monroe. Rural character was right up there. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was very high. I don't see this as enhancing anything, and it's pretty hard to figure out why we need a sidewalk there at all. I can't imagine who's gonna walk out of that. It looks like it'll service people coming out of town hall, coming out and going where? To the roundabout, and then to where? What would make anybody want to take that walk? Is it needed at the cost of character to that town green area? It's our one special feature that we should preserve. We don't need any more traffic on it. It's not going to interfere with any of either the farmers markets, and that sidewalk is not going to help it at all. None of the events we have to celebrate whether it be Rochambeau encampment and going, we have or the parade beginning or stopping there. You don't need a sidewalk for any of those things. You might as well go to the city and watch a parade. It's nice. You can go there at grass, sit on it, put a blanket down, something like that. The sidewalk, unless somebody can convince me otherwise, but I haven't heard anything, nor have I heard who specifically requested this or thought this was a good idea and for what reasons. That's all I have to say. Thank you. It's up
So
to
for the
you.
record, Mr. Bonofsky, you're speaking in opposition to this?
Unless somebody can convince me that there's a good reason, and I haven't heard that yet.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with any general questions or comments? Okay, turn it back to Will and Scott.
Well, I'll address Mr. Kimball's question, in that we did consider running to, extending over to the green side. First of all, the proposal does not include any tree removal. There's one small tree and a little monument at the bottom of it, which is in the way. And if you notice the layout, it actually is a little bit serpentine, and that is so that we can avoid that tree. We're going to be going around it. There was one other tree that the plan initially showed to be removed, but it already was removed or is slated to be, and that's over.
It was a dead tree as the parking lot was last, and most of it's been removed.
Yeah, so we chose this area here because it is in fact up in the air a little bit, and it's really from the parking area in the green, I don't think you'll be able to see it because it's a little higher up in there. So sidewalk will be at grade, so you're not going to be able to see it from the green area. Anyway, that's why we chose that area as opposed to extending across to the green. It did not require any tree removal.
With regards to character and rural, I mean, obviously, there's always things that, you know, when things change and towns develop and grow, you know, what comes into mind is, okay, we want things to look like the past. I mean, we all enjoy the rural vernacular landscapes that we have. But we also have pedestrian safety, public safety issues that we have to deal with. And there is the fireman's field. There is a parking lot that's also here at the church that gets used for the different carnivals. This gets used for the carnivals. The green gets used for different fairs. The Grange gets used for different things. The town hall gets used, and the green in front of where the gazebo is gets used. The parking lots all get used. So between these places, you know, we have people who do walk around. During the work week, we also have people who do walk in the area. They are walking presently on the grass areas. They are not walking in a defensible space such as a public sidewalk. They're transitioning across curbs that are not handicap accessible. And, you know, sidewalks is part of the fabric of all communities. They aren't necessarily taking away from the rural character to the full extent. Again, it's the balance between public safety and maintaining our landscapes. So we are making that limited connection. I could understand more if there was a much bigger plan to, sidewalk the whole thing and change the whole thing into pavement and whatnot and within the green characters. I mean, we're avoiding the actual green, which is across the street. The sidewalk, part of the roundabout is an extensive portion of the sidewalk, which, again, as I said, provides much access to multiple places along that area that get used by people. And the road system, we're talking about a state highway. People come barreling around this direction. There's a lot of different transitions and directions. Again, more need for a higher level of public safety, I think. And as Scott said, as character goes, the sidewalk will be embedded in the ground, and it will be a green strip between the edge of the road and the sidewalk itself.
Well, I just wanted to add that the federal funding typically requires intermodal elements. So the state was very interested in trying to provide, they don't just provide for vehicle access. When they do a project and you're receiving federal funds, it's typically the federal government wants to see sidewalks and other modes of transportation accommodated. So that's another reason why they were very eager to include the extension in their project.
So, is there any other questions before we?
Anything else from the commission? No. Okay.
All right, so in closing, again, you have the two separate actions. You have the special exception permit public hearing, which is, that I would suggest you would have no further questions, or you don't need any more information, you would close that hearing. And then subsequent to that, you would separately act on both the 824 referral, making a recommendation back to the town council, and acting favorably on the special exception permit application. Thank you.
We do that during the deliberation portion? Okay. So is everyone good to close this hearing? Okay. All right, hearing's closed, 9:16 p.m. Next up, item number 8, site development plan. We have none. Under deliberations and determinations, item number 9, extensions. First, we have 1-07-S, file 1453A, 74 Enterprise Drive. Mr. Infante, you're up.
My name is Michael Infante. I am here this evening to represent MMI of Monroe, LLC, for 74 Enterprise Drive, Monroe, Connecticut. This time, I'd like to formally request an extension of time to complete the special exception permit that was granted for this property. Last year was the last extension. I'm sorry, yes, it was last year. Actually, it was January of 2017. We had thought that we would be finished with the building, the second building, which was part of the approval for the special exception permit. But unfortunately, we had lost the tenant that was going to move into it. He recently purchased a building of his own on Pepper Street. So that left us without a tenant. And unfortunately, the economy the way it is, the banks would not fund the building without a tenant. Right now, I'm in negotiations with another tenant, which should be concluding very shortly, who is a general contractor. At that point, I can put up the second building and complete the plans as approved with the special exception permit. The only thing I could do is ask the board to grant the extension of time.
I understand, I've been talking with the CEO about your situation up there. I understand you've had some difficulties with prospective tenants and existing tenants. However, a year ago, when you came before us requesting an extension, we asked you to provide a schedule of events. Because, as you know, the CEO has spoken to you many times over the last couple of years about issues on your property. And we asked you to present a proposed schedule to bring the property more into compliance. And up until about a month ago, nothing had been done. And I understand that within the last month, Joe told me that you've been making an effort to get things cleaned up, and the site's looking a lot better. And we appreciate that effort. However, I am not inclined to, at this point, grant another one-year extension so that we have the same situation exist for the next 11 months, and then when you're getting ready to ask for another extension, you do a little bit more. I would like to propose, and this is not up to me, it's up to the commission, but I would like to propose that at this time we give you a 90-day extension to allow you to continue with the work you've been doing over the last month and get it further along. You can talk to Joe about what's required and what is expected on the property, and we give you 90 days, which I think is a reasonable amount of time, get you into the better weather, and continue with the work you've been doing. And then we can readdress this situation in 3 months. Do you think that's a reasonable proposal?
Yes, I do. I do. And I'll work very closely with Mr. Chapman as far as getting it to where he's satisfied.
I understand you're having some tenant issues, and that some of those
Yes,
things take some time. And our intention isn't to hold that against you, but we also want to see a little more progress now rather than 11 months from now.
I understand that. I understand that.
Okay. Anyone else from the commission have any comments or questions?
The work that needs to be performed, is that stuff that could be done?
It's cleanup work.
But can that be done in February?
Yeah.
Okay. Can that be done in February? You agree with that?
I would say the majority of it could, sure.
Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
And we're getting in February, March, and April.
No, I'm just saying, because if he can't do it in February, he kind of loses.
Yeah.
But he agrees with you, so.
Yes. Anyone else?
No.
All right, well, refresh my memory. Do we act on this now or wait for deliberation?
We would act on that.
Okay.
We're in that.
Oh, yeah, we're in
This is part of
deliberation and determination. All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
Hold on, are you seeing someone?
Oh, that's right, Paul's not here.
So that would be John.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
Jonathan, you're seated. All right, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to grant a 90-day extension to 1-07-S file 1453A, 74 Enterprise Drive.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No.
No. Well, anything else?
So when do you want him to come back to you within that 90 days? Because you would have to give him more time past 90 days before the 90 days is up.
Well, we're giving him a 90-day extension. I don't know off the top of my head what the expiration date is on his current approval, but
It's February 8th, 2018, so roughly it'd be March, April, May. March, April, May.
so he needs to come back the last meeting of April.
Okay.
Right.
So the end of April,
Come back.
come back with requesting an extension,
And progress report.
we'll readdress it at that point. I'll make sure that Mr. Chapman makes you aware of the timeline too, so that we don't have any
Right.
problems. All right, we have a motion, we have a second, call the roll.
Kelly, yes.
Mayini, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Infante.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Board.
Next up, EFP 2015-01, File 10, light excavation and filling permit for the applicant. Hello, Mr. Kimball.
Good evening, Chairman Porter and members of the commission, staff. As,
Sorry, John.
are we ready?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just trying to make this quiet.
Is it gonna do anything?
No, I was trying to shut it off. It won't let me shut it off. It's like getting.
So, as people and the members of the commission are aware, we lost our anchor tenant in the Walmart site. That caused kind of a chain reaction of events where we lost our tenant, and our project was known as Shaw's of Victoria Place at 10 Main Street, where we had a fill permit with a duration of 2 years. We've since given that property back to Shea Sprague in a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and with the agreement with them that we are allowed to continue to work on the property for the purpose of doing restoration and closing out our fill permit. We've had meetings, tried to have meetings proactively with staff, and they've been very helpful in asking us to create a construction sequence so that we could provide an orderly wind down of the job. And what we're seeking to do is basically get 6 months extension on our permit just for the purpose of restoring the site, grading off any ditches or water catchment areas, creating a safe site, putting in berms to prevent access from outsiders so that unwanted dumping doesn't occur on the property. Will had a suggestion that material that we had previously brought into 36 Main Street from off-site that was left kind of in a piled format, that we use that to fill in some of the holes that we have existing on 10 Main Street, which would facilitate kind of flattening off and cleaning up 36 Main Street and leaving it in a flattened condition. And we would use that material, fill in the holes on 10 Main Street, and then kind of grade it, flatten it off, and then we left all the topsoil from that project on that project, so we would take that topsoil, spread it over the project, grade it, seed it, hay it, and stabilize it. And then we'd work in conjunction with Solely Engineering, who would review the site, make sure that that we are not shedding water onto adjacent properties, make sure that we're maintaining proper erosion controls during the wind down process, and at the end of the job, make sure that we've left it as a stabilized site, in a safe condition. Basically, what staff's concern is, and it's our concern also, is that we don't leave an eyesore out there. As you enter the town, a big pile of material, and just leave it there forever. So we want to get in, clean it up, and we gave the staff a timeline, which I've hoped to share with the commission, which details at what time intervals we'll do such work, and then we believe that we'll be completed with the work, stabilized, seeded, and out of there before the end of June. So we're respectfully asking for a six-month extension on our existing fill permit for the purpose of stabilization.
And the 6 months would bring you to June 30th?
Yeah, it may actually bring us a little bit past June 30th, but we anticipate being done by June 30th.
Okay. Anyone have any questions?
No.
Nope. Anything from staff?
So you have transferred the property?
Excuse me?
You have transferred the property?
I have, I'll
So you
provide
can
you
document that
a
for us.
documentation for that and a permit transfer and authorization letter.
Anything else? Will, staff? Nope. All right, if the commission has no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to grant a 6-month extension to the excavation fill permit 2015-1, file 10136 Main Street.
Do we have a second? We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No.
Call the roll.
Kelly, yes. Mayini, yes.
Rosa, yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Next up, SCP 2017-13-A2, File 1549A, 464 Main Street, Crossroads Retail Center Amendment.
If you recall, there was an amendment that had to do with, they redid the drainage system and the septic system, and there was some discussion about the electrical boxes and whatnot, and they were to file plans to effectuate that final amendment and record that. They haven't quite finished that, so they need a little bit more time to do that, but it is an ongoing, active construction project.
How much time are they looking for?
They didn't state, so you can tell them what they have. You can give them like 30.
Solely, come on down.
How much time do you need, Kevin? How much time do you need?
For the record?
For the record, Kevin Soley, Soley Engineering. I think our plans are actually with staff right now, so I think and I think we actually had some communication today. I think Scott spoke with Casey in my office regarding some of the drainage stuff. So it's actually, I think we're ready, and we've had several discussions with the health department. I think we're relatively ready. It's kind of waiting for staff to say.
That was a different project that he told
No,
me.
that was 464.
154.
Oh, okay.
Enterprise.
Sorry. Either way, I think we're very close. So, I mean, if staff thinks they can complete the review and we can get the thing finished, I think 45 days would be more than sufficient.
60 days?
Sure, that'd be fine, more than sufficient, yeah.
Like 14.
Because I think there was a question about the wetlands conditions, but we had done them. I think you
No.
were trading emails with.
That's it. No, yeah.
No, that's this one. That's this one.
I do have, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have a draft on my desk. I've reviewed it already. Scott finished it today. I just have to give it back to you. So I can
Right.
probably do that maybe tomorrow.
And we can turn them around quickly.
And I don't think there were that many issues.
I assume we're probably close.
Less than 3 or 4.
Yeah.
60 days.
More than enough.
Yeah.
Thank
Do
you.
we have a motion?
Move to grant a 60-day extension to SCP 2017-13A2, file 1549A, 464 Main.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion?
No, sir.
Roll.
Kelly, yes. Mayini, yes.
And Rosa, yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Next up, item number 10, bond releases or reductions, we have none. Item 11, modifications, we have none. Item number 12, meeting minutes, December 21st, 2017. Porter, O'Reilly, Ambrosi, Kelly, and Mayini, we're all here, so we're good. Any, well, first, how about a motion?
Move to accept the meeting minutes of December 21st.
Second. Who's that? Mayini, second. All right, any discussion?
No, sir.
Anybody, anything?
No.
If we hear nothing, I'll call the roll.
Formicelli, yes. Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
Okay, item number 13, application deliberations and determinations, selected items from this agenda as determined by the commission.
Can we start with
First up, we-
sidewalk one?
Hmm?
The sidewalk one?
Want to do that first?
Yeah.
All right, we have two issues with the sidewalk. We have a 824 referral, which basically is us telling the town council that we have approved of this project, correct, Will?
You're really looking at the POCD and giving them advice and recommendation relative to the consistency with the POCD from a town perspective.
So do we want to give a positive referral to the town council on this project?
I say yes. Yes.
And why would we, for what reasons? Because it complies with the POCD, and it's enhanced for the town, and it's
Yes.
adds safety features to the town.
Yes. Makes it more handicap.
Okay. We have a motion.
Sidewalks are good. Better state, better.
Move to recommend the
Positive referral.
extension of the public sidewalk on for the town council 824.
Okay, so we have a motion to make a positive referral to the town council on this project. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No, no, sir.
Call the roll.
Formicelli, yes. Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
All right, next up, we have the special exception permit for the installation of sidewalks along Monroe Turnpike and Fan Hill Road, coming onto the property at 7 Fan Hill Road. Bless you.
Thank you.
So let's start with a motion.
Move to grant SCP 2017-12, file number 15958, Fan Hill Road, Historic District, permit for the new public sidewalk.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Discussion? I mean, it goes hand in hand with the municipal referral.
No, sir.
Hmm? I'm sorry?
No, no, this
He doesn't have it, but, we put the sidewalks in, can we, like, have a different design or
Can we write our names in it?
design the sidewalks or anything like
The
that?
sidewalks are the typical 5-foot wide.
No, I'm saying color, design, any of that?
There's no, nothing proposed, other than just typical concrete.
And they're
Are there
connecting
other
to the other
designs
concrete
that would
sidewalk.
make it look more rural than just putting,
Well, you're connecting to other concrete sidewalks.
we are connecting to
Yeah, if you
what
remember
they
the
already
figure
have.
that
No,
was
what
up
they're
on there,
putting
the
right,
long
right.
blue. What?
No, what's existing?
It's an
We're
extension
connected.
of what the state is putting in.
What the state is already
As
putting
part of
in.
the
Right,
roundabout
so they're
project.
matching that.
Right.
There are some other design features down in the roundabout.
No, I was just, yeah.
And it will also match the sidewalks that are at
Town hall.
the front of the town hall.
You know,
I
we
was just
all
asking that
uneven and broken.
Yeah.
Not in that fashion.
We don't want to match that.
That's all, you know, that's the rural character, it goes up and down.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
That's actually really funny.
Any other questions?
They'll be all one piece.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. I'll call the roll.
Formicelli, yes. Mayne, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
O'Reilly, yes.
All right. I want to open deliberation on SCP 2017-11.
Can I tell you something first?
Hmm?
Can I sidebar with you for a second?
Sure. All right, 124 Enterprise Drive, as a usual practice, we'll start deliberation on this, but we're not going to vote on this until we have a draft letter in our hand with a determination that we will then vote on. Ryan, since you're new here, I'll just point out to you, you are not seated on this for deliberation, so you just observe.
Yep.
What's the feeling of the commission on this application?
I say yes. Approve? Approve.
Approve with no portable toilet required, nor any other septic system or leaching field required.
There were other requirements in the paving and et cetera, but.
Yeah, but nothing with the septic.
Right, those were, all- well, but they're valid points that should be addressed as part of the deliberation. The biggest issue is what was discussed this evening with the total elimination of sanitary facilities on the site. So first, is everyone in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes.
So that is part of the approval, that there will be no sanitary facilities on the site.
And that will be based on a findings that it's not necessary for this use, based on the operational characteristics as represented by the applicant.
Right.
Okay.
Now, I don't have my notes in front of me, but there were some other issues or items that were brought up during deliberation. As Michael pointed out, the area, the entire area, other than the storage bins, is to be paved. And I believe that was a requirement of the inland wetlands approval.
The wetlands was paving the entire parking area and storage of the equipment area. You
Right.
guys extended it a little bit further all the way to the bins.
Yes, we said everything except the storage bins.
I thought we said gravel on the storage bins.
Yes.
We're paving everything except the storage bins.
So you would be making a findings that the need for pavement would not be necessary, the alternative service of gravel would be acceptable because of the operations would otherwise damage the pavement underneath the storage area.
Okay.
Sure. Scott?
Yeah.
Well, were there any other issues
Just,
that were added, deleted, or changed from the final, or the last submitted site plan?
I'm going to look at that while Scott tells you whatever you want to tell me.
yeah, a couple of my things to start off with, you might want to consider that for, that, you know, the determination of the elimination of the sanitary facilities, you might want to clarify that it's only for this proposed use and that it doesn't extend to any future changes to the property or other uses on the property.
Yeah, that would be the finding.
Okay.
All right, and I just have an item about the survey being properly certified. I had originally provided a comment about providing a landscape island at the end of they have required parking. I don't know how important the required parking is, given their presentation about the use and the fact that they're coming in a truck and they're leaving in a truck. I don't know, do you guys still require parking on the property? Anyway,
Well, the parking is only requiring 3 parking spaces.
and the reason I was suggesting, you put an end island, a landscaped island at the end of the parking, so it delineates the area where they're gonna park, and it kind of prevents them from using it for the uses that they're using the rest of the property for. They probably won't like that because it'll be in the way, but I also noticed on here that they had a couple of, I think it's in the area where they have proposed the potential dumpster, is that what it was?
In the way of what?
Well, in the way of snow plowing and just their, moving equipment around.
Operate there.
They're not
Oh, no,
operating.
that's where the toilets were, okay, they had, but they're not gonna put the toilets there now, so they have a handicap parking space that's just kinda, there's nothing protecting it. Usually you have an end island when you have a row of parking, I'm just saying, that's typical. I mean, it's,
I would be inclined to say on this, for this particular use, that the island is not really
Yeah.
required.
understand. Understood.
Is that it?
You done?
Yeah, I think that was it for me. Yeah, the side entrance and exit I had, it really cannot accommodate the small truck without encumbrance in and out, but they also indicated that this is very low use. It's gonna be one vehicle at a time, so I really don't have that issue, that level of concern anymore. So, yeah, I'm suggesting you could drop that. And the only other comment was about the sanitary, and you've addressed that. The bond recommendation again was for $23,000.
Okay, we had commented on the requirement for a street number out at the street, whether they put it on a mailbox or a sign or whatever, the property has to be identified. I believe that they're originally proposed to plant a wildflower mix along the shoulder of the road, and we requested that be made a grass area that would be maintained and mowed.
Yeah, I think that.
I think that was changed.
I think that's on the
plan.
plans, but if it isn't, I can reiterate that.
I want it to be very clearly noted that there's to be no crushing, sorting, or processing of any material on site. This application is for storage only.
And I would also reiterate the fact that that use also prohibits the vehicles, the operating vehicles, to be stored on the site are only those that are used on site. They're not, I mean, that doesn't include the truck coming, going with the material, but it's not a place where employees come, dump their cars, pick up a truck and go to a job site and come back, dump the truck and drive the car away. The other issue that you need to resolve is the timing, because this is in part a remediation of a violation. And they were asking for a 2-year period in which to complete the plan while continuing their current operation.
I am not opposed to giving them 2 years to complete the storage bins. However, they have requirements from the inland wetlands approval that have to be met. And if that requires that the site be stabilized in a certain period of time, they have to decide how they're gonna stabilize it. They either have to topsoil it and seed it, or they have to pave it, but, you know.
Yeah, I think that could be accommodated. Their main issue was getting the detention area finished. If they are staging it, and they're not gonna put in all the storage units, then that area where those bins would be will need to be uniformly, safely graded, either grass area or a stone area that is such that it's not being utilized for daily.
Well, I could foresee a scenario where the storage bins get built and the detention basin and other issues get deferred for 2 years. And we need just the opposite to happen.
That's correct. We're gonna have a pre-construction meeting on this, and they're required to build the storage bins because, like any development, before any changes in the runoff occur, any increases in runoff, the drainage has to be put in first. So it is a little, it's such a small development, I don't quite understand why that they would need to stage it to that.
Well, I want our approval to clearly state that the timeline is to be established by fulfilling the requirements of the inland wetlands approval.
All right.
Well, there are activities outside of the wetland regulated area, though, that are part of this project. And you should have some upset time from your own perspective to remediate the zoning violations. Because I'm not hearing that wetland stabilization is the same thing as bringing it into zoning conformity.
Yeah, that's a point.
Yeah. For those of you not familiar with the site, we've had some zoning compliance issues with use of the site and what has been on the site. I'm just trying to think what would be a reasonable requirement to bring the property into zoning compliance, not necessarily having the project complete.
Yeah.
Well, if it's a having the project complete would be zoning compliance, but, I mean, the applicant requested that it would take them 2 years, so, I mean, that's a starting point to think about. Whether that's enough, not enough, that's up to you.
I think that's a little excessive. I mean, I can understand 2 years to complete the project, but it shouldn't take 2 years to bring the property into compliance. I mean, if compliance issues are, they have a crusher on the site, they have other equipment stored on the site that shouldn't be there, it doesn't take 2 years to get that out of there.
Well, do you want to then set forth, in addition to what the wetland requirements are from a physical point of view, any time stipulation as to when the non-authorized activities would cease, as opposed to the bins and the physical construction?
Well, they're gonna have to they're gonna continue using this site until it's done. And while they're using it, it's all non-compliant, right?
Well, there's non-compliant using it for storage in a different fashion, and there's non-compliant continuing to process material on site and store material on site. The offending in the zoning, besides not building the original plan, is the processing, charging, which is not permitted and is not going to be permitted with the.
That's one thing.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, you could separate that issue from the physical construction of the layout. I mean, you could still use the site, let's take it the broadest sense. You could stop doing the processing, crushing tomorrow, and just use the site as is for storage, and then take 2 years to build it out for the way the storage is designed. So, I mean, that could be the worst case scenario, or the hardest one, I should say. Or you could give them 6 months
So
to
the
do
main
that.
zoning infraction is the process.
Well, that's what's not permitted.
Right.
I mean, again, they're nowhere close to compliance with their approved plan. But that is the one thing that is much in conflict with what this use will allow. This use does allow the storage. Some part of what they're doing is storage today.
Right.
So it may not be in the bins like it's supposed to be, but that's still compliant with the use you grant.
Another concern that I have is that if they don't do the paving, if they defer that, that's a problem, because the whole purpose of the paving is to assure that the runoff gets into the drainage train that gets into the detention basin and goes through the stormwater quality unit as opposed to seeping down into the ground. So I think that the paving, the drainage and paving needs to be done initially before they are utilizing the area and for storage.
But they're not gonna do the paving until they build the bins. So.
Well, see, that's the problem, that's what I'm saying, it's like, I just don't see, I don't see how you could phase this project. I mean, when you look at what needs to be done, I mean, just do it.
What's required for the wetlands remediation?
Again, it was to remove the use that's happening there without their approval, which will happen with this approval. That was the main thing. And then to stabilize the areas so that they are not getting any erosion going toward the wetland through the drainage system. And as discussed during the hearing, that could be looked upon differently. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be lawn or grass. The area that's within the, call it a buffer of the wetlands, is really at the bottom of the wall to this facility, and that has already happened, and that's already stabilized. And so that's the main issue with wetlands. The upper portion, it's a matter of just having some stable material. That may be in conflict with zoning, as you said, but all they need is that it's stable. So I can go with crushed stone or seeding it with topsoil.
So we can make the requirement that the site be stabilized and leave it.
Yeah, if they don't want to do certain elements of the work, like put in the bins, they need to stabilize that. Now, you're
But
concerned.
my point is, we can say the site must be stabilized within X number of days. How that is done, you can work out with the applicant.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then they have a little bit of.
Now, from a zoning perspective, when is a pile of stone, is that acceptable? Because that's stable, that's not gonna run off anywhere. Or do you want it leveled and?
Their proposal, if I'm not mistaken, their plan shows a maximum elevation relative to the road, 467, 470, something like that. So their approval limits the height of their piles with a set elevation. So that's already in the plan. So, I mean, I don't think we need to really even address that any further. That's been addressed. They are only allowed to store material to this elevation.
Yeah, I mean, my concept is that in restoration, it's wetlands is E&S, soil erosion issues, zoning is safety, so, and other issues. So my mind, it would be kind of leveled off so that it's not irregular piles and things like that that are very hard to monitor. It would just be kind of cleaned up and graded uniformly and left in a condition that isn't going to erode and be a problem.
Yeah, but you can do rock crushing.
But that's.
Have it not erode.
But that's.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
that's why the zoning part of this thing may kind of supersede what wetlands is looking for.
But if this application is approved, they have the right to store material in piles on the site. And if we're giving them.
Well, they have the right once they're done with the work.
Once they're done, they gotta build bins and
They're not supposed to be doing anything on
pavement.
site,
So
technically.
you're saying that until the bins are constructed, they can't store material on
Well,
the site?
technically, until the entire thing is done the way the plan says, they're not supposed to be operating. So there really shouldn't be anything in the bin. Shouldn't be any coming and going. Now, obviously, that's not a reality of an ongoing business, but, so that's why I said if you want to look at the components of the business that are unauthorized and are going to cease eventually with implementation of this approval, maybe those get phased in a different way or they cease sooner.
So when Wetlands approved it, they approved it with the expectation that they were either going to get an approval of P&Z and build this thing, or they were going to cease operations, cut the piles down, either topsoil and seed, or have maybe a few areas of stone that are stable, and there'd be no use of the property. That was their expectation. So if you guys want to build on that, then that would be the way to do it. But they want to see either or. this thing about phasing the actual work, that's not the inland wetlands expectation. Because if the work goes on, they want to see pavement where, or they not want to see, they require that it be paved in the area where the equipment is stored and where the cars are parking, that the driveway be paved, and they require that to be done initially, which means they have to put the drainage in, they have to finish the detention basin, they have to pave it, and then the remainder of it, what's it gonna be used for? Storage of the piles, and then it's your question of whether can they store piles without building the bins. That's really what it comes down to.
So what you're saying is that they can't use the property until it's built out, it's completed.
That stuff.
Well, technically, if this was a green site, and they came in for this plan, yeah, they would have to build it first. When they're done building it and it's deemed compliant with the plan, then they can move in the material into the bins and they can start going back and forth with the material.
Okay, input?
I don't wanna make it too complicated, so, that way, they're looking for 2 years. I mean, if we're gonna get the end results in 2 years, then.
Yeah, but the point is that they're not legally gonna be permitted to store material.
Real on the site.
I know there is.
Right, well, I'm saying, so, I mean, if we get to the end result, I mean, we already know there's a problem, so, I mean, if we end up with the end result, that's my opinion on it, and,
I think it should be stabilized.
well, we know about stabilizing over there, right, with the wetlands.
No, the whole site has to be stabilized.
No, I think that should be done ASAP, or whenever they get back to work. I think we should give them some time to do that, and then they got their time frame to complete the work.
You know, February, March, April, by the end of April, it's
Plenty of time.
it's a pretty good, no.
No, no,
I'm
no.
talking about stabilization. Here's what I'm thinking.
It's unstable by the sun.
The non-compliant activities like the crusher and all that stuff, that goes immediately.
Right.
I mean, no grace period, get that stuff out of there. 90 days to get the site stabilized. And they can work out with Scott how they propose to stabilize the site. And
Done in 90 days with that.
in 90 days, stabilized, yeah. Now, that could be grading off, that could be
However they
silt
decide.
fence, stone,
However they
they'll
decide.
figure that out. So by the end of April, the site's stabilized. And then I would be inclined to say 1 year on the approval. And if they have to come back for an extension, they can come back for an extension.
Now, didn't they say that this was gonna be seasonal?
If you give them 1
We
year,
ever
you can use
determine what
3 months.
seasonal was?
No. But the public hearing's closed, so we're not getting any new information.
Right, but, so,
It's gonna be the paving season. It's gonna be
Right, there's
when the plants open in the spring until when the plants close in the fall.
My only issue with the 1 year mark is they lose 3 months due to weather period. I'm sure he's laid everybody off, all his workers or whatever. How about like a 16 months?
No, I would like to give them 12 months, and then we can reevaluate the situation.
See how far along he is in
Yeah.
12 months?
I'm looking for this or this.
Yes, so 1 year and then 90 days to stabilize.
so you're talking about,
What?
you wanna include the 1 year in the 90 days, or you want 90 days and then the 1 year?
No, I want.
You want 1 year
Bill
total?
wants, Bill's proposing 1 year
proposing
total.
1 year total, but
the
within
first
90 days, the site be
First 90 days
stabilized.
it's stable,
And
then a
they
year.
immediately get the non-compliant, non-conforming activities off the site.
There's a crusher on site?
So,
I don't know if it's still there, it was there.
so let's
The
take
crusher
into
still there?
consideration.
What was that?
Is the crusher still on site?
Oh, I don't know. So what was your?
Well, that's not supposed to be there anyway.
That's the,
Yeah. Point of it.
That's, yeah, we.
But that's not part of I didn't know that was there.
No, that was there.
So they're having 1 year to complete the, what did you say about the crusher and stuff?
they have.
That's
they
gonna be
have-
going
they
up
have- They have no time to get it out.
Oh, that's what I was asking about before.
All right, so the crusher goes. Anything that's non-conforming, non-compliant has to be removed from the site immediately. They have 90 days to stabilize the site, and how that is done will be determined by the town engineer and the applicant. And if you can't come to terms, then they're gonna have to come back here. And they have 1 year to complete the project, and at the end of 10 or 11 months, if they're not done, they can come back and tell us why they're not done and what they have left to do and what their schedule is.
And during that 1 year, they're not using it until they complete the
No, they
project.
can use it for the authorized activities under the permit.
Yes,
Correct.
They can't use it for non-authorized uses.
correct.
Correct.
You think, because he probably laid his people off for the winter, right? So you
Yes.
guys have enough time to get that done?
That's what it
Yes.
said.
It's not gonna take them that long to stabilize that site. It's not that big.
All right, no, I'm just saying.
90 days? There's plenty of time.
It's gonna take
No,
them a
no,
week.
I'm talking about.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
That's plenty of time. Anything else? Any other, all right, so based on these parameters, are we looking to instruct Will to do a draft of an approval?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Then, is it part of the approval gonna have that there's no full-time employees in there and
Yep.
stuff like that?
Yeah, you're gonna make some findings relative to that.
But they've said that from day one.
Right. No, I know, but I mean, we probably have to have them.
Yeah, it'll be-
Oh, no, I'm
it'll
just
be an
saying, but-
approval.
That's true, just because you said.
All right, so we'll put together a draft. We will have an opportunity to review it. If there's anything that we feel is missing, or
Next meeting we can vote on.
we'll review it at the next meeting, and if appropriate, we'll vote on it at that time.
Excellent.
Okay? Anything else we should be deliberating on?
That's it, I think.
Okay. 14, regulation review amendment work session. We'll address that at our next meeting. I'm away next week, so we'll have to wait. No correspondence.
There's a letter in your file.
Correspondence received.
It's regarding the Monroe property.
Monroe property.
Oh, I thought this was for our next meeting.
No.
Oh, yeah, it was in the transmittal material for our next meeting. That's why I didn't look at it.
Next meeting, I think it was this meeting.
Yeah, it is. It wasn't supposed to be in your transmittal for next meeting.
Oh, yeah, January 12th. Oh, no, January 18th.
January 18th, material for the upcoming Planning and Zoning Commission. So I assume that to be our next meeting.
Yeah, no, it's not in that packet anyway. It may have been with it. It says none under other places. Anyway, this letter came in on January 10th, or 11th. This is relating to the Mondo project. If you recall, this commission granted a zone change, or a couple zone change relative to this property. Had two properties involved. The applicant has to date not done anything other than file a zone map. They also are in front of wetlands relative to their violations in wetlands, and I believe they are past due. Is that correct, Scott?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to that.
Mondo, are they past due relative to the wetland schedule as well?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Wetlands Commission requested that I issue a citation.
Well, this letter is saying this.
I'm sorry, what's that?
The Wetlands Commission wants me to issue citations for both properties because they're way over their deadline to submit remediation plans. And we've received information that they're working on the property, and it appears that they're saying they're moving material around to better locations, but it's been reported to us that they're filling in regulated areas.
Well, they also don't have any approval to put, move, or do anything with that material anyway, so.
Yeah, yeah. So that's where we,
Okay, but if that's where we stand, what's being done?
On our end,
Yes.
Yeah.
on zoning, nothing to date right now.
They're requesting a cease and desist order. What is that?
That's, they want to issue an enforcement order to have them stop doing what they're doing.
Has Joe been out there?
Well, obviously Joe has issued many letters to them, that's why they came too long ago. I don't think he's done anything in a while.
Well, this letter came in on the 10th, that was 8 days ago. Has he been out there in the last 8 days, do you know?
I don't think he has, but I'm not gonna say that 100%.
No, I'll call him tomorrow.
Place is a mess.
I mean, it's pretty serious. We've been working with them for quite some
Joe.
time.
Yeah, we'll go from there, right?
Yeah. They're not even making any good faith moves here at all. They're making bad faith moves.
All right, well, I think the next step is we have to get the ZEO to go out there and evaluate the situation and go from there.
Yeah, Joe's last action according to them is July 8th, 2016.
I think that's the best approach.
Right, that's what we shall do. All right. Chairman's report, I already noted at the beginning of the meeting that Mr. Mayini is now a full commissioner, and we have our new member, Ron Conlon. I don't have anything else to report at this time. Any commissioner reports? Anything?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, one thing for the commission. The two appeals on 387 Main Street, the Patriot Estates, we won both appeals.
At the hotel?
That's the hotel. And the appeal period ends as of business tonight, but I had not checked the judicial website to see if a notice of intent to appeal was filed.
Now, that was the appeal to the ZBA ruling?
And planning and zoning.
There were two separate
There were two
things that were
separate things.
consolidated.
Okay. What was the planning and zoning, that we approved it,
You approved the project.
we approved it based on the ZBA
Well, one
approval?
of
Yeah.
the grounds was that you approved it, you shouldn't have approved it until ZBA came through, which is not even a valid argument. The court just threw that out summarily. And they also indicated that because ZBA, you couldn't base your decision because you didn't have any validity, and there was a problem with the frontage, which basically both the ZBA and the commission put in their decisions, the reasons. But we argued that back in the end of September, and we got the decision just after Christmas. So we won both decisions, and if there is no appeal, then basically those projects are ready to go forward.
Yeah, good job,
Project.
thank you.
Well, nice gift going out the door.
Yeah.
Don't forget your suitcase.
Anything else, staff? You all received an email about a meeting on March 22nd. You can't go because we have a meeting here that night.
What do you want?
It's the annual conference of the Planning Conference Federation, which we
I wouldn't miss this for the world.
Oh, the one up in Prospect?
Bill, I'm not gonna be here on the twenty-second anyway.
How do you know?
I'm going
All right, cool.
Oh.
I won't be here.
I'll watch the horses.
Someone's not gonna be at the next meeting? Did you say you're not gonna be at the next meeting? Or March?
No.
He won't be here March 22nd.
Uh,
Why? Why'd you say next meeting? What do you mean?
I was just,
Because the next meeting,
I'm
we're
just
gonna have.
getting,
a-
so I can tell
I
Laura.
get my packet, right?
What?
And I don't get my minutes in the packet.
You don't get your minutes? Please contact Laura.
I'll contact her, tell her, because I looked through the whole thing, we goes, oh, let's look at the minutes, and I looked in my packet.
We good to go?
Well, we're not adjourned yet.
No, wait for you. Motion to adjourn.
Is there anything else?
I'm starving.
Anybody, anything?
No,
All right.
good to go.
10:16, we are adjourned. Woo!